Chapter 346. Yes, my goal from the beginning is you. Faceless One said while adjusting his posture in the fall. Those idiots can't see the situation clearly, they only know how to chase the immediate trivial interests. What king's treasure house, world destroyer, black dragon? A bunch of ignorant fools. What's the difference between losing and gaining those things? Would the church fall apart after losing the king's treasure house? Would the church be able to sit back and relax after eliminating the decadent Breton dragon clan? What a joke. Wang Lu said with a smile, then in your opinion, what should we do to make holy light religion last through the ages? It's very simple as long as all the threatening opponents are purified. In this world, from small individuals to large countries, the way of survival is like this. Compared to Breton dragon clan, you, a foreigner, are more qualified to be called a powerful enemy. Holy light religion has been in a difficult situation this time. In addition to the heathen city-states in the east, the biggest variable is you. Those idiots think that because your level is not high they can ignore it. I don't think so. Throughout history, I don't know how many huge empires and organizations were destroyed in the hands of a rapidly growing genius. And you obviously have such potential. Even if you can't subvert the holy light, your threat is still far away in the Breton dragon clan. Wang Lu said, actually, I also think so. Therefore, I always think that, compared to the painstaking effort to purify those ready-made powerful enemies, it's better to take advantage of the fact that those geniuses haven't fully grown yet so that we can get twice the result with half the effort. I feel the same way. My only regret is that on the day of the Battle of Dragon City, I didn't see your threat in time. Otherwise, with my complete strength, even if the Night King was by your side, she still wouldn't be able to save your life. Faceless One's complete form was the strongest person in holy light religion below the legendary level, so his words were quite convincing. Later on, I was severely injured by the Night King, which is difficult to recover in a short period of time, and the idiots in the church are not worth relying on. Therefore, I had to take some risks and personally deal with this woman, and sure enough, I succeeded in one fell swoop. The fall of Lu Li was an undeniable mistake on Wang Lu's part. Despite the fact that the one who made the move was a holy light purifier whose strength was far above Wang Lu's, and despite the fact that Faceless One's method was so strange that even Aya couldn't see through it, these were not reasons for him to excuse himself. Hearing Faceless One mention this matter, Wang Lu's eyes became gloomy. Faceless One said, at that time, I occupied her mind and planted a seed in her mind. Actually, it was quite difficult. Because of her poor state, I almost failed and implicated her body. And even if she succeeds, there will be many flaws left. Once you notice something unusual, you can investigate her mind over and over again, and it will be hard to guarantee that there won't be any flaws. Therefore, at that time, I used 2 layers of camouflage. The simplest is the drink. Although it looks suspicious, it's actually just an ordinary drink. However, because it looks too suspicious, it will more or less affect your judgment. As a truly intelligent person, you will never think yourself clever and give up the investigation just because it looks too obvious. I believe that you have also seriously investigated whether Lu Li has any signs of poisoning. Unfortunately, it's non-toxic. As for the second layer of camouflage, it's my words, making you think that I'm trying to manipulate her mind. Of course, this layer isn't completely a camouflage. If she's really stupid enough to act on her own and not listen to commands in battle, displaying some sacrificial spirit, I'll be more than happy to see her die a tragic death, and then deal a fatal psychological blow to you. Your mind is very strong, but if this woman really sacrifices herself for you, you will not be able to bear the blow. Wang Lu coldly said, unfortunately, I will not give you that opportunity. Of course you won't, but so what? The spirit of sacrifice is just my camouflage. Moreover, it has successfully deceived you, making you think that my means only stop there, making you ignore the real key. Faceless One said, his tone becoming more and more sarcastic. This woman is really interesting. Although it seems that her mind world is pure and untainted, which is the most difficult thing to succeed. But in fact, deep in her heart, the entanglement is far more than other people. Moreover, this entanglement is something that even you, her closest senior brother, haven't seen or even discovered. When I was seriously injured, my spirit occupation could not even exert 1/10 of its power. Even an ordinary middle-order profession may not be able to successfully occupy my mind. Yet, I was able to succeed against her. The flaw in her mind is so big that it even surprised me. Faceless One went on and on. The more he talked, the more proud he became. Then, as her senior brother, don't you want to know where exactly her flaw is? Haha, no need to deny it, you must want to. I can see that this woman has been heavily influenced by you in all aspects. Her mode of thinking, her mental defense, a large part of it was constructed by you. You taught her what is important and what is not, what needs to be done with all her might and what can be ignored. You think that the defense you designed for her is perfect enough so you can't figure out where exactly I made my move, am I right? I'd like to hear the details. Wang Lu did not put on airs. Seeing that the other party seemed to be able to show off, he simply asked seriously. Haha, actually, the reason is very simple. It's because she likes you. Wang Lu was slightly stunned. Is it news that she likes me? Of course she likes me. Because she likes you, so she also hopes that you can like her. Wang Lu said, of course I like her, she should be very clear about that. Faceless One's voice became a bit colder. Of course she knows, but what she knows is that your liking is like a brother and sister. You like her and you also like many other people around you. However, what she wants is not this kind of liking. Wang Lu was even more stunned. Not this kind of liking? Then what does Lu Li want? Or perhaps, with her IQ, can she distinguish the difference between so many kinds of liking? Although Wang Lu did not speak, the subtle changes on his face were captured by Faceless One. Faceless One suddenly laughed wildly. However, in the accelerated fall, his laughter became distorted and strange. Ah. Do you think this woman is simple and ignorant of worldly affairs, so she doesn't understand anything and her heart is blank? No wonder my spirit occupation has been lurking for so long, yet you can't even detect a clue. It turns out that you don't really understand her, or rather, you don't even try to understand her. Because she is simple and straightforward, you self-righteously think that everything about her will be at your mercy, that everything about her is under your control. Unfortunately, even I, who is the best at playing with human nature, would not be so arrogant and conceited. Faceless One continued, what she wants is a more intimate relationship between the two of you than the current one. But she knew that it would only bring you trouble, so she never took the initiative to open her mouth. She didn't even show the slightest sign in front of you. But, when you and other girls laughed together, when you risked your life and death to come to Bretonia for the sake of other women, do you think her heart didn't have any billows? Wang Lu was silent for a long time. Lu Li's heart is pure and untainted. I'm afraid it's not that easy to make her jealous and hateful. Faceless One shrugged and said, yes, this woman's heart is pure and untainted. Even after the spirit occupation, I can't let her have hatred, loathing, and other negative emotions. However, pure and untainted does not mean that there is no 7 emotions and 6 desires, nor is it forever calm and without entanglement. In other words, a girl's entanglement in love is one of the most beautiful emotions of human beings, so it's not dirt at all. This time Wang Lu was really shocked. Unexpectedly, a pervert like you is actually an expert in love and marriage. If jesting can make you stick to your heart, then you can continue to try. Faceless One sarcastically said, do you think I'm showing off my ability to play with people's heart by saying so much to you? I just want you to clearly see your own stupidity, see your own dereliction of duty, and then, under the guilt, bombard your heart to pieces. Wang Lu sighed. You're right, this matter is indeed worthy of my guilt. When I was on the mountain, I was entrusted by Uncle to train Lu Li, teaching her a lot of knowledge. However, I never taught her the psychology of love, which led to a fatal flaw in her knowledge structure. And this time you actually took advantage of this to enter her. When I go back from this trip to the West, I must open this course for her, and then teach her physiological health so that later on she won't be fed a banana or see a goldfish without knowing it. Faceless One curiously asked, do you think you still have a chance to go back? Nonsense. Wang Lu suddenly became impolite and coldly responded to Faceless One's question. Otherwise, why do you think I want to listen to your nonsense? Where do you think we landed? Faceless One was startled. He glanced around, but his line of sight was completely blocked by the clouds, unable to see what was going on. Don't try, without the help of the level 8 vehicle, I can't see anything. Lu Li's perception is not much stronger than mine, and now that she's seriously injured by you, she can't see anything. Without the help of the level 8 vehicle, he couldn't see anything. However, Wang Lu had been controlling the Golden King's vehicle until not long ago. Yes, this is the endless sea. As soon as his voice fell, the clouds dispersed, and an endless blue ocean appeared under their feet. The howling wind on the sea wrapped the two people. If you want to eliminate me, a genius who is a huge threat to the church, then now is the time. With a calm smile, Wang Lu crashed into the sea, setting off huge waves. Not far from Wang Lu, Lu Li, who was occupied by Faceless One, also fell into the sea. However, Lu Li, who was controlled by Faceless One, didn't have Wang Lu's non-phase method to protect her body. After falling into the sea, The powerful impact immediately made her dizzy, and her body shook, almost breaking her internal organs. When she came back to her senses, Wang Lu had disappeared. And the location of Faceless One was not in the desolate underwater world, but in a dark green abandoned ancient city. Is this the legendary lost city of Atlantis? Faceless One looked around and was surprised to find that there were familiar marks on the buildings of the ancient city ruins. There's actually a passage to the endless sea inside the Sea of Clouds? It shouldn't be such a coincidence, right? No, Atlantis has been lost for tens of thousands of years, and no one has been able to find it. Perhaps the endless sea has already been. However, the main task now is to purify the heretic. Unfortunately, the time was too short, so it was too late to occupy his spirit. It's rare that he has already revealed a flaw. However, by choosing the battlefield in Atlantis, does he think he has a chance? Faceless One lightly said. Because his expression was stiff, it was impossible to see his inner activity. However, even he himself didn't realize that the wounds on his right hand that he deliberately cut off were rapidly healing. Chapter 347. Wang Lu, calm down, calm down. Everything that can be done has been done. The situation has been laid out. Now, victory or defeat will be decided by this. In the deep sea, Wang Lu quietly stood on the wreckage of a palace in the ruins of the ancient city. He swallowed a few mouthfuls of bitter seawater to calm his mind. Next, he could not afford to make the slightest mistake in his every move. There was no room for error. Lu Li being plotted against was indeed beyond his expectation. The various protective measures that the sect elders put on Lu Li did not work. However, when he thought about it, it was not strange. The opponent was a near-legendary profession. Moreover, this was the Western continent where the rules were different, so it was not surprising that there would be an accident. Therefore, any prior precaution was not secure. Only by perfectly adapting to the situation could he protect Lu Lin. Regarding Wang Lu's ability to deal with situations, everyone was very assured, including Wang Lu himself, who was also full of confidence. Unfortunately, in the end there was still an accident. Moreover, it was an accident that Wang Lu could not absolve himself from. He thought of all the factors, but he did not expect that Lu Li's young girl feelings would actually kill her. And this was not Lu Li's responsibility. Wang Lu, as her guardian, must take full responsibility. However, the more critical the situation was, the less time he had for self-blame. Even if it was a sin that could not be redeemed by 10,000 deaths, he must first deal with the opponent, and then consider how to punish himself. The situation was far from desperate. Although Faceless One held the hostage, Wang Lu also had a card in his hand. Moreover, it was a card that, in theory, was enough to crush everything. He had the support of Golden King. Without Golden King's acquiescence and secret help, his starting point in the Sea of Clouds might not necessarily be the Demon Castle, and outside the castle, it might not be that easy to find the abandoned chariot of Golden King. And the most important thing was, without Golden King's acquiescence, there would be no detailed map of the Sea of Clouds in the chariot. This was common sense that was easily overlooked. Even a slightly high-grade chariot would record the journey. Wang Lu's biggest goal in scavenging was not the chariot itself, but the journey that the chariot recorded. At the same time, this was also a secret that Wang Lu didn't tell anyone. When he took control of the chariot, he found that Golden King had indeed recorded his route to and from beautiful unique Pool Peak in the chariot's device. Although Golden King didn't explore the whole picture, he had recorded 60% of the terrain along the way. This map was a real priceless treasure. And the icing on the cake was that Golden King even thoughtfully marked some key locations on the map. This was the reason why Wang Lu dared to take the risk alone. The endless sea, the forgotten city of Atlantis. This was the place that Wang Lu had chosen to reverse the situation according to the Golden King's markings during the short confrontation. It was also the only opportunity that he could grasp. "Li, wait for me," as he muttered to himself. Wang Lu tightened his grip on the final trump card in his hand. Atlantis, the forgotten city, the ruins abandoned by the gods. At the other end of the city ruins, a stiff-faced girl slowly walked. Relying on her own perception, she tracked the traces of Wang Lu while coldly glancing around. As her body moved, she vaguely felt bursts of pressure. Legend has it that Atlantis was once the pinnacle of civilization in the Western continent. The dreamlike city was not even inferior to the legendary Penglai immortal domain in 9 regions. However, just like the Age of Chaos calamity in 9 regions, which destroyed the vast majority of the immortal civilization, Atlantis also sank permanently in this catastrophe. Rumor has it that Atlantis, because of its overly developed civilization, became arrogant and insufferably arrogant. The people of Atlantis were disrespectful to the gods, and thus were punished by the gods of the western continent. Moreover, it was a permanent punishment. In the city of Atlantis, they would never receive the gift of the gods, only the wrath and curse of the gods. Of course, the legend was just a legend. Atlantis was destroyed tens of thousands of years ago, and the history of Holy Light religion was probably not that long. However, being in it, Faceless One could clearly feel the magical power of this place. It was the rejection of the divine power. The object of worship of Holy Light religion was the Sea of Holy Light, not the personification of the gods. However, since it was a religion, it also had something in common with the religion that worshipped the gods. The power of Holy Light was essentially a kind of divine power, so it seemed reasonable for it to be rejected in the city of Atlantis. Was this what Wang Lu was sure of? Did he choose this battlefield that was favorable to the pagans to try to make a comeback? A very clever idea. The rejection of the holy light in the ruins of Atlantis was firm and without any gap. The ubiquitous repulsive force made the parasitic Faceless One feel the pressure, which made it difficult for him to maintain a perfect spiritual occupation of Lu Li. This left an opportunity for Wang Lu. If it was a one-on-one showdown in the ruins, Faceless One could not guarantee that he would not reveal his flaws. In case Wang Lu used some method to expel him from Lu Li's body, the situation would be instantly reversed. While thinking, Faceless Demon had already captured Wang Lu's position. He was hiding in an abandoned palace ready to make a move. It seemed that he was waiting for her arrival, but it also seemed that he might rush out at any time, which caught her off guard. Faceless One did not continue to move forward, nor did he use the hostage to force Wang Lu to come out. He gently shook his head and inwardly sneered. Taking advantage of the geographical advantage of Atlantis was really a naive idea, because he did not intend to have a one-on-one fight with Wang Lu. Previously, he used the hostage because there was no other way to catch up with him. But now that he had been dragged out of the vehicle, the rest of the work could be handed over to the laborers. Faceless One did not trust Paul, Ferdinand, and the others, but when needed, he would not reject using their power. Humph, it's time to let those idiots play their role. Then, he used the connection between his avatar and his main body to send a signal. At the same time, in another place in the Sea of Clouds, the holy chariot was moving at top speed. Because of the overload, the energy core was constantly groaning, which made the atmosphere inside the chariot particularly anxious. Faceless, why haven't we caught up with them after chasing for so long? Didn't you say they stopped? Paul asked anxiously. When he heard that Wang Lu and his team had obtained the inheritance of Golden King, a level 8 vehicle, Paul could not help but panic about the prospect. He had long known that as the administrator of the king's treasure house, he was not liked by Golden King. If not for Golden King's remnant soul, which had lost the actual control of the treasure house, he would have been expelled by Golden King long ago. And this time, in the face of Wang Lu's challenge, he had no doubt that Golden King would secretly make his move. Once he let Wang Lu break through, the administrator title would inevitably change hands. At that time, his situation would be worse than death. Seeing that Faceless One was silent inside the vehicle, Paul could not help but say, "Faceless, this is not just about me, but about the development of the entire holy religion." Found it? Faceless One suddenly opened his mouth and then pointed to a certain direction in the Sea of Clouds. "Go there, they are hiding there." Paul's spirit was shaken. "Good, everyone, let's work harder. As long as we intercept those heretics, we will win." Under the urging of Paul, the holy chariot sped up a bit. Under the extreme speed, the body of the chariot constantly trembled, as if it could fall apart at any time. However, it was bound by the joint efforts of several people inside the chariot, wrapped in a powerful holy light, and could not break free. Before long, the chariot broke through the layers of Sea of Clouds and came to a blue ocean. What is this place? The place where the enemy is hiding? Faceless One didn't explain more. He just led the chariot straight into the sea, and then, in the monstrous waves, went straight into the deep sea area where Atlantis was located. After approaching Atlantis, the city ruins rejected the holy light, which made the holy light religion people vigilant. What is this place? How could it reject the power of the holy light so much? Ferdinand was surprised to find that his power, which was suppressed by the Sea of Clouds, had actually dropped by half a level. Paul fiercely said, "Cunning heretics. To hell with this savage land." Amidst the curse, the group of people finally landed at the designated location of Faceless One. In the square of the ruins, the holy cabin door opened, which caused the entire overburdened chariot to shake. The group of people impatiently rushed out of the chariot, but they didn't find any trace of the heretics. Ferdinand asked in a cold voice, "Faceless, where the hell are they?" "Over there." In the deep sea, the voice became a bit strange, but Ferdinand could still hear that it was a crisp and sweet voice of a woman. He turned his eyes and saw a beautiful but vaguely familiar girl slowly walking over. She had a near-perfect figure, but for some reason her right hand was missing 5 fingers. The Supreme Inquisitor was stunned, and then he realized, "This is the trophy of your spirit occupation and also your card?" Using spirit occupation to capture the hostage and then using the hostage to threaten the opponent to surrender was a common trick of Faceless One. Although it was old-fashioned, it was tried and tested. Faceless One was too lazy to answer and just said, "The target is in that palace. You guys go and purify him. Ferdinand, you stay here with 2 archbishops to protect the hostage." 3 archbishop-level death soldiers, plus the good-for-nothing Paul, who was still a holy one. With the 4 of them joining hands, no matter how great his ability was, Wang Lu would still end up dead. However, Faceless One did not relax his vigilance. He refused to give Wang Lu even the slightest chance. Obviously, it was already a fatal situation, yet he still arranged a heavy force around the hostage, leaving no flaws. Soon, Paul led the 3 archbishops into the palace, while the Supreme Inquisitor led the remaining 2 archbishops to guard Faceless One's side. At this time, Faceless One suddenly smelled a strange fragrance. It was indistinct, and at the same time, it was also disturbed by many noisy smells in the deep sea, making it difficult to identify it. "Do you smell anything?" Faceless One asked Ferdinand. The latter twitched his nose and frowned. "It seems to be the fragrance of meat?" Faceless One was stunned. The deep sea abandoned city couldn't even light a fire, so where did the fragrance of meat come from? Ferdinand's brows furrowed tighter and tighter. In addition to praying to the holy light, one of his hobbies was food. Therefore he had a strong ability to recognize this smell. "This smell seems to be the cooking method of those yellow-skinned bastards. I remember it's called pork stewed with vermicelli? Moreover, they added a lot of vinegar, so it's very sour." "Pork stewed with vermicelli? How can there be the smell of pork here?" However, before he could think too much, Faceless One suddenly felt that the body that was occupied by his spirit was somewhat out of his control. A strong will boiled inside his body, and his previously heavily injured right arm involuntarily lifted up. 5 fingers were cut off, and from the hollow of his palm, a dense sword chi, like a simple and unadorned flying sword that wanted to pierce the blue dome of heaven, flew out. In the blink of an eye, the flying sword pierced through Ferdinand's chest and came out of his back. A transparent hole suddenly opened up. Chapter 348. Ferdinand had always distrusted Faceless One, but he believed in his devotion to the holy light. He also believed that as long as they had the same belief and the same goal, they would have the opportunity to travel together. Therefore he never thought that one day the other side would suddenly change sides. This blow was so fast and ruthless that he simply had no time to react. The severe wound on his chest shocked Ferdinand. The Supreme Inquisitor incredulously looked at Faceless One and then looked down at his wound. The wound caused by the flying sword showed no sign of healing. Originally, with the Supreme Inquisitor's legendary level strength, even if his body was torn apart, he could quickly regenerate it. However, at this time he was suppressed by both sides, and his strength was only at the intermediate high-order level. Moreover, this sword contained an irresistible penetrating force. The wound was constantly eroded by the adhering force, completely unable to recover. What was even more fatal was that the tip of the sword seemed to be coated with a highly toxic poison. The Supreme Inquisitor's strength quickly dissipated from the wound, completely irreparable. It was as if this was a long-planned assassination, and the strong targeting was frightening. "Faceless you." The Supreme Inquisitor struggled to maintain his standing posture. He wanted to ask why Faceless One plotted against him. However, as soon as he opened his mouth, blood gushed out, and he was completely unable to speak. The next moment he was even more desperate to see the 2 archbishops fall beside him. It turned out that the power of the sword just now was beyond his imagination. At the same time that the sword pierced his chest, the aftermath dispersed, and the unparalleled sword wind cut off the heads of the 2 archbishops. 3 kills in 1 sword, 3 kills in 1 sword. How could there be such a sharp sword in this world? With intense astonishment, the Supreme Inquisitor's line of sight fell into darkness. And the one who was also shocked by this sword strike was Faceless One himself. What's going on? Although Faceless One was experienced and knowledgeable, he was also shocked by this sudden change. His spirit occupation of Lu Li should be absolute. Even if in Atlantis City, his spirit occupation was suppressed, he still had absolute confidence that it would not leave any opportunity for him to take advantage of. The consciousness of Lu Li has obviously been suppressed by him in the deepest darkness, and the most likely to erupt at several points. The yearning for Wang Lu, the attachment to her master, and the desire for swordsmanship, were all blocked by his spirit occupation. But just now, a powerful will erupted like a volcano. It was unstoppable and it directly penetrated his rule. It took over his body's right hand and summoned a flying sword that had been hibernating in his body, Skybreaker. Skybreaker was the weapon that Lu Li obtained from the ancient sword tomb. It was once a famous immortal sword in 9 regions. Although the sword's spirit had fallen, its sharpness did not diminish in the slightest. Wherever the sword touched, there was nothing that it could not destroy. Even the Supreme Inquisitor would find it difficult to escape. Moreover, this sword came too suddenly and no one could react in time. Without taking any precautions, who in the world would dare to go head-on against the edge of an immortal sword? After that sword strike, Faceless One tried his best to suppress the right hand that had gone berserk. However, once this force broke out, it was difficult to control. Especially after the Skybreaker was unsheathed, its sharpness was unparalleled. His spirit occupation was ineffective, and instead, the force that he left in Lu Li's body was constantly weakened. As for the Skybreaker, after the full power of the one-sword triple kill, although it was indeed a bit weak, its sharpness was still sharp. Faceless One's body was seriously injured by Aya's sword strike, and then he risked his injury to use his spirit occupation. Actually, he was already in a precarious situation. He had no fighting ability at all, so he didn't dare to be too close to the berserk Skybreaker. Therefore, while trying his best to maintain the spirit occupation, Faceless One quickly retreated. However, before he could even take 2 steps back, he saw that his out-of-control right hand suddenly thrust the sword back, as if he wanted to commit suicide. Faceless One was inwardly shocked. How could he dare to let this sword stab him? If Lu Li really committed suicide, Wang Lu was likely to activate his life-saving prop to withdraw from the scene. Those 10 Spirit Sword heavenly talismans. Faceless One didn't think that Wang Lu was really faking it. The reason why he placed such a large force around Lu Li was to use the hostage to contain Wang Lu, so that he couldn't leave and could only be besieged to death. Therefore, seeing that Lu Li's consciousness was awakened for some unknown reason, and at the same time she intended to commit suicide, Faceless One immediately made a decision to stop her no matter what. His main body was here. As long as he merged with his avatar, the power of his spirit occupation would be further strengthened, and he would certainly be able to suppress the berserk will of Lu Li. However, the Skybreaker in Lu Li's hand was too powerful. Although it was a dead object, there was still a trace of Sword Demon's aura on it. Although it was only a trace, it could still force Faceless One, who was not in a complete state, to be unable to approach it. If Faceless One had to force his way closer, he would definitely be injured by the Skybreaker. The situation was extremely awkward, but Faceless One's reaction was extremely fast. Seeing that brute force was not going to work, he immediately changed his mind and shouted, "If you dare to commit suicide, your senior brother's life will not be guaranteed." Lu Li's berserk right hand suddenly stopped. Faceless One was inwardly shocked. Lu Li's stimulation was really not light. Resuscitation of her consciousness had unexpectedly reached the point where she could recognize the dialogue. Moreover, with the continuous resuscitation of her consciousness, the power of her spirit occupation continued to weaken, and it seemed like she was about to be completely out of control. Was there something special about her mind cultivation method, or was it because of the Skybreaker in her hand? For a time, Faceless One was unable to determine. However, resuscitation was also a good thing. Otherwise, it would be difficult to restrain her. "Listen, your senior brother is in that palace and he has been surrounded by us. If you don't obey, he will die." If it was the normal Lu Li, upon hearing this, she would just snort disdainfully. "Senior brother is so powerful, why should I worry about him? I just need to protect myself and that would be the biggest help to him." However, at this time, Lu Li was still under Faceless One's spirit occupation, so her consciousness was not clear. She just vaguely felt that she must not let her senior brother be trapped in a dangerous situation. Seeing that Lu Li was stabilized, Faceless One's heart was somewhat at ease. He didn't need Lu Li to be immediately obedient. As long as she was confused and hesitant, it would be enough for Paul and the others to purify Wang Lu. At this time, Paul and the others have been in the palace for some time. With their absolute strength advantage, the outcome of the battle would soon be clear. Sure enough, There was a loud rumbling sound from the ruins of the palace, and most of the palace collapsed under the impact of the huge force. The dust was stirred by the seawater and dispersed in all directions, which carried a strong smell of blood. The desolate and lonely figure of Wang Lu stood on the rubble. He had lost his right arm and left eye, and his whole body was bathed in blood. However, his left hand was still holding the sword, and he still drew out a 3-foot sword defense, resisting all the external forces. He was like a lonely pine tree in a blizzard. Unfortunately, no matter how hard he tried, he could not hide his crumbling posture. To be able to persist for a moment under the siege of Paul and the 3 archbishops without dying. Although this was also because most of the power of the Holy Light religion's people were suppressed by the law, Wang Lu's defensive ability was still breathtaking. A young man who had yet to reach King Pil, who had yet to enter high order, could actually withstand several rounds of siege in the face of 4 powerful enemies whose strength was far above that of ordinary high-order cultivators. This kind of powerful defensive ability was simply unheard of. If given time, when he broke through the King Pil and reached Yuanying, perhaps he would be able to walk sideways in the Western continent. Unfortunately, that was a thing in the future, a future that could never appear. Kill him? Faceless One coldly ordered, showing no mercy. Paul turned around and glared at Faceless One. Inwardly he was extremely angry. At this moment, how could he not know that he had been deceived by Faceless One? There was no Golden King's level 8 chariot here. The real level 8 chariot had already gone far away and could no longer catch up. Faceless One wasted precious time and opportunity to deal with a young man whose strength was not even worth mentioning. However, at this moment he had no choice. In addition to Faceless One, no one else could track the enemy's position in the Sea of Clouds. Even if they wanted to catch up, they couldn't. Moreover, Paul also knew that the young man in front of him was playing the role of the leader. Once he was beheaded, the other side would not be much of a threat. Faceless One's obsession with him was also reasonable. Kill him. Paul roared and, at the same time, silently recited the hymn of the Holy Light in his mind, extracting the power of the Holy Light, which resonated with the 3 archbishops. The Holy Light gushed out from his body and rushed straight up. The 4 of them joined forces to fuse the Holy Light into a small sea of Holy Light. The pure and clean energy, driven by the thoughts of the 4 people, gradually condensed, deformed, and turned into a sharp sword. The Holy Light sword shone in all directions. Even in the territory of Atlantis, it was still difficult to cover its brilliance. In just a few rounds of fighting, they had already seen that Wang Lu was very good at fighting one against many. Under the non-phase sword defense, there was not much difference between 1 person and 10 people. This was also an important reason why he could persist for several rounds under the siege of 4 people. If they wanted to kill him, they had to fuse their power into a higher level of power and crush all his defenses in one fell swoop. In the face of the Holy Light sword above his head, Wang Lu's complexion was unprecedentedly dignified. Non-phase method was indeed the world's #1 defensive method. No matter which continent, there was no method that could match it. However, non-phase method, after all, was not omnipotent. In the face of such a desperate situation, perhaps non-phase sword. And at this moment, a clear and crisp shout came from afar, and it arrived in the blink of an eye. Senior brother? Wang Lu was startled and turned his head to look. He didn't know when, but Lu Li had completely regained her freedom. With an eager face, she flew through the air. The more than 10 flying swords around her seemed to be overflowing with light. They flowed out from her sleeves and skirt, interweaving into a rainbow, which was too beautiful to behold. However, Wang Lu was not in the mood to appreciate the beauty. He roared, "Lu Li, get out of here." After all the hardships, choosing the right place, personally acting as the bait, and using a strange method to break the spirit occupation, did he want her to die together with him? Seeing that Lu Li got rid of the spirit occupation and even killed Ferdinand and the others, Paul and the others were also surprised. However, seeing her and Wang Lu's reaction, after a moment of surprise, they were pleasantly surprised. They wanted the 2 of them to die together. Therefore, they simply let go of the encirclement and let Lu Li come to Wang Lu's side. Senior brother, Forget it, since you're already here, let's just take things as they come. Wang Lu smiled bitterly. Holding the sword with one arm, he gently held Lu Li in his arms. Around the 2 of them, the people of Holy Light religion gradually surrounded them. In addition to Paul and the other 3, the Supreme Inquisitor Ferdinand and the 2 archbishops also came over with pale faces. Although they were just beheaded by Lu Li's sword strike, the gift of Holy Light gave them a chance to come back from the dead. At this time, even though they were weak, they firmly stood on the front line, completely cutting off the hope of survival for Wang Lu and his senior sister. A wonderful performance, full of twists and turns. Faceless One slowly approached them, but when he reached a certain distance, he stopped and cautiously hid behind the protection of his companions. Indeed full of twists and turns? Wang Lu sighed with emotion. I really didn't expect this child to be stupid enough to not know how to cherish the opportunity to escape. Using a strange method to break through the spirit occupation, and then using the Skybreaker to kill 3 people, Luli just had the opportunity to escape alone. After all, the other party's focus was on Wang Lu, and when the Skybreaker was officially launched, it also had a considerable suppression effect on the spirit occupation. However, Luli resolutely chose to live and die together with him. This was even contrary to common sense, because Wang Lu's education for Luli had always been to take care of herself, not to care about others, especially not about him, Wang Lu. However, the first thing that Luli did after the resuscitation was to throw the teachings of her senior brother to the back of her head. This reminds me of the words that I said to her on the night of the celebration in Dragon City, Faceless One lightly said. At that time, he instigated Luli to sacrifice herself to help Wang Lu with vicious intention. Later on, after being seen through by Wang Lu wanted Luli to forget every word of those words. Luli would not pretend to agree but secretly oppose. At that time she said that she would forget, so naturally she would forget. However, there were some things that didn't need Faceless One to instigate. When things came to a head, Luli would naturally make the same judgment. Sacrificing herself to help her senior brother. Even if, in fact, she couldn't help much. Seeing this, Faceless One only dared to ridicule her in his heart. Senior brother, I didn't listen to your instruction, I'm sorry. Luli seemed to be completely unaware of her situation. Her smile was still as brilliant as a flower. Wang Lu sighed. Forget it, dying together with you can at least help you improve your average IQ. While speaking, he hugged Luli even tighter. His warm body dispelled the coldness of the deep sea. As his body rubbed, a unique stick-like thing quietly rubbed from Wang Lu's waist to Luli's lower abdomen. Luli's eyes looked down, and through the deep ravine on her chest, she vaguely saw a very familiar thing on her lower abdomen. Although you're disobedient, I'm really glad that you're here. This thing is just right for you to hold in your hand. Take it, Luli. Luli obediently stretched out her hand and held that thing tightly. It was the joystick that she had seen on the vehicle. She didn't know when it was pulled down by Wang Lu and brought here. At this time, the fully prepared Holy Light Religion people also made the decision to attack. Kill them. At the same time, Luli held the joystick upside down and held it high. Faceless One's eyes narrowed and his heart almost stopped. How could it be it? How could it be it? Golden King actually hid this treasure in the vehicle and used it as a joystick? The next moment, a copious amount of energy burst out from the top of the joystick. Luli, holding the short stick, was stimulated by the energy. Her figure involuntarily swelled up, and at the same time, a rough shout burst out from her chest. Verundershezada. Chapter 349. As the ancients said, the right time, the right place, and the right people were the 3 magical weapons to win the war. However, for Wang Lu, he didn't have any of these 3 magical weapons. In terms of the right time, this was the time when Holy Light Religion was fighting on multiple fronts. The whole religion was in high alert. In terms of the right place, the king's treasure house was Holy Light Religion's own backyard. As for the right people, in the face of a group of legends and quasi-legendaries, how could they talk about the right people? Any rational person would not choose to fight against Holy Light Religion in such a situation. However, Wang Lu confidently rushed forward, neither calling for help from his sect nor waiting for a better opportunity to appear. Where did he rely on? Was it really because his immortal cultivation was too smooth that he forgot himself? Wang Lu of course was not that stupid. This time he rushed into the king's treasure house. Although it was a risky move, he was taking a risk and not throwing away his life. He had his own assurance of victory. This assurance was the support of Golden King himself. Wang Lu had enough confidence to win the support of Golden King. First, the 2 sides had the same interest. Holy Light Religion occupying the king's treasure house was obviously against the will of Golden King himself. However, as a wisp of remnant soul, he did not have the capital to confront it head-on. He was like a king who was a mere figurehead. However, the appearance of Wang Lu gave him the possibility to regain his authority. As a person of 9 regions, it was impossible for Wang Lu to live here for a long time. Therefore, the long-term interests of the 2 sides were not contradictory. Second, Wang Lu's posture was ingenious. With the pride of Golden King, it was impossible for him to admit that he had lost control of the situation. Therefore Wang Lu never took the initiative to mention any alliance or assistance. Instead, he cautiously maintained a neither servile nor overbearing attitude, neither appearing greedy nor weak. In the first few trials he fully demonstrated his talent and repeatedly dealt a serious blow to the usurping minister of Holy Light religion. As for the secret support of Golden King, he accepted it all without being greedy. This was the attitude of a loyal minister to the king. Third, Wang Lu was talented and his personal ability was against the heaven. He could repeatedly perform miraculous comebacks, which made Golden King very happy. Golden King was naturally willing to generously reward him and support him to continue to move forward. In summary, although the two sides had never made it clear, Wang Lu was confident that he had indeed won the support of Golden King. And as a remnant soul, what was the value of Golden King's support? To Wang Lu it was priceless. No matter how down and out Golden King was, he was still the master of the treasure house. A little quiet action could benefit people endlessly. Especially from the beginning of the Sea of Clouds, Golden King seemed to fully trust Wang Lu and spared no effort in his support. From the starting point of the Sea of Clouds to the unearthing of the chariot, from the map stored in the station car to the magical joystick. If Wang Lu could win this round, most of the contribution came from Golden King, but this was also a matter of course. Without this kind of support, Wang Lu would not come to court death. And now, Wang Lu turned out the last card that Golden King gave him, which was also the most powerful card. The scepter held by the King of Atlantis, the leader who had once led the people to rebel against the gods. It symbolized that the king would not submit to any god, and the wielder would be immune to all gods' powers. It was simply the perfect nemesis of Holy Light religion. However, the drawback was that its effectiveness was limited, and in addition to immunity to the divine power, it basically had no other function. Wang Lu held the scepter in his hand for a long time but refused to activate it. It was precisely because for him, even if he could activate the scepter in exchange for a moment of invincibility, he would be powerless to make progress. However, the arrival of Lu Li reversed everything. The girl had an explosive attack that was far beyond her level. Once she gained immunity, she would become an unstoppable war machine. Holding the scepter, Lu Li was stimulated by the power and involuntarily let out a roar. It was a rough roar that completely did not belong to a girl. The sound waves surged through the sea and set off layers of twisted ripples. Facing the sound waves, the faces of the Holy Light religion believers were aghast. Because under that roar they actually felt that it was difficult to resist. Their internal organs were shaken out of place, and the blessing of the Holy Light seemed to have disappeared. If it were other people, perhaps the effect of immunity to the divine power could only be limited to defense. However, for Lu Li with her brilliant sword heart, it was easy for her to extend this power to attack. The next moment, the sword chi that swept through thousands of troops swept across with earth-shattering power. The 5 archbishops who bore the brunt of the attack didn't even have the time to utter a sound before they were swept by the sword chi. Their bodies were as if they were cut into countless pieces by thousands of knives. Paul's face was aghast, but as a holy one, his reaction speed was extremely fast. With a thought, he flashed dozens of miles away into the deep sea area. His life-saving ability was brought into full play. The Supreme Inquisitor's reaction was faster, but he had just been resurrected, so he couldn't be as flexible as Paul. In the face of the sweeping sword chi, he could only hold his own holy object, the ruling sword, in front of his body, hoping that this holy object that was bred in the sea of holy light could resist this disaster for him. However, after a crisp sound, the ruling sword was cut into 2. However, the aftermath of the sword chi hasn't been completely offset, so it cut off half of the Supreme Inquisitor's body. Faceless One was seriously injured, so his performance was even more unbearable. Although he stood at the back, his reaction was also the slowest. After being swept by the sword chi, his body shook and then disintegrated into countless fine powder. Lu Li's full power strike with the scepter was earth-shattering, which had the power to exterminate the Holy Light religion. 5 archbishops and 1 holy one fell under this sword strike, and Faceless One's body didn't even remain. However, the burden on Lu Li was also extremely heavy. Despite the scepter's support, she still felt a burst of dizziness, and her jade mansion tightened as if it was about to burst. This was a sword strike that completely exceeded her limit. If not for her special physique, this sword strike would have caused her to go berserk. However, seeing that the battle was about to be decided, Wang Lu still didn't stop. He pointed his broken arm forward. "Go after Paul." Without hesitation, Lu Li moved according to his order. Her body turned into a rainbow light, and like a lightning she rushed toward the direction of Paul's escape. Her momentum was like a sword, and the tens of thousands of tons of deep-sea pressure seemed to be nothing, unable to stop her in the slightest. At the same time, dozens of miles away, Paul, who was still in a state of shock, had yet to regain his composure when he saw a bright light approaching from afar, rapidly approaching. With his amazing eyesight, Paul's eyes penetrated the darkness of the deep sea and saw that the person who came was Luli. It was just that, after the girl's full power strike, she quickly chased after him, so her consumption was quite severe. Especially since the power of the scepter was also rapidly fading, the girl's body continued to shrink. Being firm and fierce would not last long. Rationally, if Paul turned around and fought back, his winning rate would actually be quite high. Even if he was the most worthless Holy One, he was still a Holy One, so his understanding of power was far above Luli. In addition, his own stage was also high, and he gradually got rid of the suppression of Atlantis City. With these several factors combined, he had no reason to be afraid to fight. If it were Ferdinand, he would definitely turn around and fight back. However, Paul had long been scared out of his wits. Seeing that Luli was like a hot knife cutting through butter, he turned around and ran, not daring to stay for even a moment longer. However, by a stroke of luck at the beginning, Luli's speed was much faster than his. The distance between the two continued to shorten, and after a while, Luli found it difficult to continue. Her speed became slower and slower, and the distance between the two gradually widened. After a while, the power of the scepter completely subsided, and Luli returned to normal. The previous overload caused by the internal injury backlash, which made her cough up blood. Seeing this, Paul was overjoyed. If he could catch this woman, he could reverse the situation. However, just as he turned around to capture Luli, he heard the rumbling sound of the surging sea behind him, as if there was a terrifying giant approaching at an extremely fast speed. Deep-sea beast? There's one here too? Just as this thought appeared in his mind, Paul felt a sharp pain in his back, and then a violent impact bombarded him. The next moment he felt that his body suddenly became light and fragmented. After that, the endless darkness engulfed him. Not far away, Luli, who had to stop because of the heavy burden, was surprised to see a burst of golden light in front of her. In the middle of the light, the conical tower was lying flat like a sharp lance. The tip of the lance was still stained with Paul's body fragments. Sister, cough, cough. Luli slightly opened her mouth, but just as she tried to speak, her mouth was blocked by the blood that gushed out. The girl coughed incessantly, and her slender waist was forced to bend down. Before long, the Night King, who was dressed in military uniform, hugged Luli and reached out to stroke her back to soothe her injury. Luli, don't talk, leave the rest to me. Okay. The girl nodded, uttered a sweet nasal sound, and then, unable to hold on any longer, fainted. The Night King picked up Luli and returned to the chariot. The conical tower slowly rotated and gradually accelerated forward. Before long, they arrived at the ruins of Atlantis. In the middle of the ruins, Wang Lu leaned against a broken stone pillar, half lying on the ground. His whole body was covered with wounds and he looked desolate and miserable. However, the smile on his face was particularly relaxed. Seeing the slowly approaching chariot, Wang Lu shook his head. Didn't I tell you to take little Bai and the others straight to the finish line and leave me alone? Aya jumped out of the chariot and said with dissatisfaction, You said to leave the rest to me, but you didn't say that we should leave you behind. Wang Lu said, I thought with your perception, you should understand what I'm talking about. I gave tit for tat. I thought with your perception, you should understand that I can't leave you alone. Tiske, you disobedient ruler of a subjugated country. Hey, people who don't know how to give up can't be successful. When you cook, it's because you don't know how to put less seasonings, and you don't use fire when you should, that's why you always make dark cuisine. Is this how you treat your savior? Wang Lu laughed. I caught an unexpected captive, so I'm in a good mood to make fun of you. Captive? Faceless One. What? Upon hearing that Wang Lu had captured Faceless One, Aya's shock was no less than the moment when Faceless One appeared and his spirit occupied Luli. More than 100 years ago, when he was still very weak, the church's sharp knife that could give Aya a headache was actually captured? Faceless One was captured by you? Where? Wang Lu pointed to his head. Here. Chapter 350. Bus. As soon as Wang Lu's voice fell, Aya unsheathed her caliban and pointed the sharp blade at Wang Lu. Who exactly are you? While speaking without waiting for Wang Lu's reply, her sword had already chopped down. Wang Lu was taken aback. He raised the sword of Mount Kuan to block Aya's attack and cursed, What the hell, dead chef, you want to rebel? You can't even recognize me, the one and only returning customer of Spirit Sword Mountain? Aya resentfully put down the Caliban. I thought your spirit was occupied by that guy. To some extent you two are quite similar. You're really blind. But, did you really capture him? I still found it hard to believe. The most difficult thing to deal with Faceless One was that his whereabouts were unpredictable. Not long ago, when she used the Caliban to seriously injure him in Dragon City, she still failed to eliminate him, let alone capture him alive. Regarding Aya's suspicion, Wang Lu also sighed with emotion. Faceless One is indeed an exceptionally powerful opponent. This time, when I broke into the king's treasure house, it seemed like I was courting my own death. Actually, with the support of Golden King, I was basically assured of victory. However, because of his appearance, I almost capsized several times. This guy's will to fight is so strong that I've never seen anything like it in my life. Just now, little Lazuli wiped out the entire team with a single sword strike, destroying Faceless' physical body and the spirit he left in Lazuli's body. However, at the moment of crisis, he used his remaining strength to launch a counterattack and targeted me with mind occupation. Huh? Wang Lu said. At that time the overall situation was just settled, and a normal person's spirit was completely relaxed. Plus, I was seriously injured and my mood was up and down, so it was easy for him to take advantage of me. It can be said that in the whole battle, the best time to make a move was precisely at the moment when the outcome was already decided. He's indeed a cunning opponent. I sighed. Although looking at Wang Lu's appearance, he had properly resolved the final counterattack of Faceless One, listening to him mention the situation just now still made people nervous. However, because that moment was the best time, not only he was clear about it, I was also clear about it. I've been waiting for him for a long time, and I've finally waited for the chance for him to use himself as a gambling stake. After that, there's nothing else to say. In the state of remnant soul, Faceless could not break through the defensive circle of my non-phase method. Under the collision, his soul almost flew away. So, I suppressed him in my non-phase immortal heart. For the time being, he can be regarded as a prisoner. Wang Lu said, seemingly shrugging his shoulders, but the truth was not that simple. Why would Faceless One make a futile struggle? His counterattack at the last moment was exceptionally fierce, almost piercing through Wang Lu's defense and successfully occupying his mind. It could be said that the most dangerous part of this battle was the last moment. However, no matter how thrilling it was already over. Although Faceless One was only a hair away from a comeback, this hair was a world of difference. A victory was a victory, no matter how thrilling it was still a victory. After a moment of silence, Aya asked, "How do you plan to deal with Faceless One?" It just so happened that Wang Lu was also thinking about this question, so he casually replied, "Lock them up in the flesh puppets and humiliate them?" What? Huh? Wang Lu suddenly came to his senses. Remembering that Aya has always been an upright person, he corrected himself. I mean to influence him with justice and benevolence, to let him put down the butcher's knife. Aya felt that Wang Lu was simply looking down on her IQ. Wang Lu sighed. To be honest, I'm also very embarrassed. No matter how cruel the torture method is, compared to what he did, I still feel that my imagination is insufficient. With that, Wang Lu cast a glance at the still unconscious Lu Li. Although the wound on the girl's right hand had healed, her once slender fingers haven't been regenerated. Lu Li was a sword cultivator, so the importance of her fingers couldn't be even the slightest bit of mistake. Therefore, as a medical practitioner, Bai Shixian didn't dare to act rashly. She was waiting for the situation to stabilize and then seriously prepare for the treatment. Alas, the girl's slender jade-like hand has turned into a doryman. It really breaks people's heart. Aya curiously asked, "What is a doryman?" Wang Lu was also taken aback. Hey, in the face of little Lu Li's injury you actually care about doryman? No wonder people say that the Night King has no humanity. Aya was flabbergasted and felt extremely ashamed. Wang Lu sighed. Right now, I intend to simply take him back to the sect and let the Heavenly Sword Hall elders deal with him. After all, they are all experienced people, so I believe that with my master's deep lower limit, they would certainly contribute something new. Thinking of the famous fifth elder of Spirit Sword Mountain, especially her abnormal lower limit, Aya couldn't help but feel a chill. Moreover, this Faceless One has so many secrets, wouldn't it be a pity to just kill him like that? If I don't squeeze out all of his remaining value, I would feel sorry for my hard work. Yes, I really can't let him off too easily. Thinking of the past and recent enmity, Aya didn't have any sympathy. She seriously nodded in agreement. At present I'll try my best to lock him up. This guy's means are strange and changeable. If he escapes, all my previous efforts would be wasted, Wang Lu said. Although he was reluctant, he still earnestly operated his non-phase method to stabilize his immortal heart. So, do you want to continue? Aya looked at Wang Lu's scarred body and couldn't help but ask, can you still hold on? Wang Lu scolded, when a woman asks a man this kind of question, do you expect to get a second answer? Of course I can. While saying that, he staggered to stand up. His robe was torn, his body was full of scars, and he looked unprecedentedly embarrassed. Aya sighed and then silently reached out her hand to support Wang Lu. Yo, left hand Luli, right hand me, left hand embracing both men and women, really worthy to be the Night King. Aya said, if you say that again, I'll leave you behind. After returning to the war chariot, Wang Lu really couldn't drive, so he calmly recuperated in the corner. Bai Shixian was next to him, healing his injury, but the recovery speed was very slow. Aya inserted the scepter in Lu Li's hand back into the control panel and complained, you said you'll leave it to me, but before you left, you pulled the joystick away and almost destroyed our chariot. It doesn't matter, I already knew that a person as tough as you would definitely find something to put back. Aya shook her head and no longer paid attention to Wang Lu. Instead, she concentrated on operating the chariot. The chariot contained the map left by the Golden King, so the direction was very clear. The chariot rushed out of the deep sea and before long, it returned to the main road and rapidly moved forward in the sea of clouds. Along the way, without any words, Wang Lu closed his eyes and operated his non-phase immortal heart, suppressing Faceless One until he couldn't move. After the non-phase immortal heart stabilized, Wang Lu opened his eyes. The tower-shaped chariot had traveled half the distance, and the journey was smooth. And with the help of Bai Shixian, the King Pill-level God Healer, Lu Li's injury was also stabilized, which finally made people feel relieved. However, although he was relieved, Wang Lu still couldn't help but feel heavy. This time, Lu Li was in danger, but thanks to a bit of luck, she was finally able to reverse the situation. Although she had the support of the Golden King, every step was still cautious. After all, the person involved was Lu Li, so he couldn't help but worry. This accident was no doubt due to the means of Faceless One, and Wang Lu was also thoughtless. However, the root cause was that Lu Li, a person with brilliant sword heart and clear mind, unexpectedly had such a big psychological defect, which was really unexpected. Unexpectedly, because of her lovesickness period, she was actually taken advantage of by others. What a gaffe this was. Wang Lu didn't like to care about what had happened. Everything must be looked forward. Since he saw the defect in Lu Li, then he must find a way to make up for it. This love psychology and physical health education. When he returned to the mountain, he must earnestly teach it by example, so that this fool would remember it for the rest of her life. However, remembering that in the battle just now, this fool disregarded his previous teachings, resolutely gave up the opportunity to escape alone, and returned to live and die together with him, Wang Lu couldn't persuade himself to scold her anymore. If not for her disobedience, Wang Lu wouldn't have the means to stage a shocking comeback. Along the way, there was only the slight buzzing sound of the chariot. Aya held the joystick, maintaining the same direction. By the way, Wang Lu. Halfway through the journey, the chariot driver Aya suddenly asked, don't you think the rules here are strange? Why do we have to take the chariot to go forward? At present, we have already passed 3/4 of the journey, but I don't think we need to rely on external forces to break through those traps. Even if the strength of the participants is limited here, it's not so difficult that it can't be overcome. Wang Lu said, your artistic and fresh behavior of sitting in the chariot and feeling the relaxed environment of the outside world is very shameful. No, I'm really strange. You see, the rule that we have to take the chariot to enter the Sea of Clouds is even earlier than when Golden King took this place as his own. That is to say, it's not tailor-made by Golden King for us, but a rule that existed a long time ago. But what is the reason for the existence of this rule? Who set this rule? Upon hearing this, Wang Lu was startled. After thinking about it carefully, he silently took out a rope and a helmet from his mustard seed bag. He put on the helmet and then tied himself to the ground with the rope with one hand. What is this? Aya asked doubtfully. Wang Lu said with a smile, nothing, I just remembered that we should wear a helmet and a seat belt for safety. You continue to drive, I'll help Lu Li and the others. I have a bad feeling about this. Next, I'll have to trouble you to aim at the direction of beautiful unique Pool Peak and increase the speed of the chariot to the limit. Don't worry about it even if it will hurt the body. What's going on? While tying Lu Li to an object, Wang Lu replied, at least from the current clues, The biggest possibility that I can think of is that there is an obstacle that cannot be overcome by manpower near beautiful unique Pool Peak. When people reach this obstacle, they will lose their ability to move. During this period, they must rely on the inertia and defense of the chariot to rush through. Our predecessors, who built the castle and other transit stations, discovered this problem in the process of exploring the Sea of Clouds. Therefore, they simply set the rule that people without a chariot don't have to go to the Sea of Clouds to die. In other words, it won't be long before we face the first impact, so I'll have to trouble Master to drive faster. Seeing that Wang Lu had tied the ropes for everyone except her, the driver Aya couldn't wait to pull out the joystick and beat him. However, the next moment an invisible impact came head-on. Aya's vision turned black and she suddenly lost all consciousness. Chapter 351. In the darkness there was a little light. The light was erratic and his consciousness was hazy. Wang Lu shook his head hard, but he couldn't become more awake. He was still drowsy. The surrounding was empty, and the distant light was erratic. Are you interested in making a deal? In the darkness, a familiar voice lingered in his ears. Heh. Wang Lu coldly sneered, refused without hesitation, and then closed his eyes again. However, the voice in his ears didn't give up. If you refuse this opportunity because of a moment of dislike, you are likely to regret it. For example, don't you want to know what will happen to Lu Li after her spirit is occupied? Wang Lu said, I'm not interested to know. In any case, even if I know, I can't cure it. Sooner or later, I will take her back to the mountain and hand her over to the elders to be dealt with. If they can deal with it, then deal with it. If they can't, at worst she will become a vegetable. I will remember to water and fertilize her every day. Hey, it sounds like you're really not worried at all. However, from another perspective, don't you want to know the secret of spirit occupation? No. Really? You got the support of Golden King in the championship trial, and all the way you were like a hot knife through butter. Those several idiots were obviously 100 times stronger than you, but they were played by you. The only obstacle you encountered was me, and the only thing I can threaten you with is spirit occupation. When I was seriously injured and dying, I could invade the genius cultivators of your 9 regions with spirit occupation. Are you really not interested in this skill? Wang Lu sneered, but when the words were about to come out of his mouth, they suddenly changed. Of course I'm interested. Well, although you really don't want to hear too much from me, deep in your heart, you must be interested in spirit occupation. For you, curiosity is a trait that will never be lacking. Wang Lu frowned and thought about another problem. Here you can't lie? Yes, in this world no one can lie, so you don't have to bother to deal with me with words, and you don't have to worry that I will lie to you. I can talk to you like this because of the blessing of this world. At present, I'm being suppressed by you very well, so you can rest assured. You're trying to sell me mind occupation. Are you trying to survive? I'm not that naive. If I fall into your hands, of course it'll be a fate worse than death. I'm looking forward to what kind of torture you'll bring me. So the deal I'm talking about isn't about buying my own life. Then what do you want? I hope you can stop your cooperation with Golden King, not only for me but also for yourself. Faceless One's statement immediately aroused Wang Lu's interest. You want me to give up the king's treasure house? On the contrary, I hope that you can keep the treasury in your hands and not hand it over to others. Faceless One said, I can guess the tacit understanding between you and Golden King. He helped you defeat Holy Light Religion, and you helped him recapture the treasure house. The method used was nothing more than to give up the administrator authority after winning it, so that the authority would return to the hands of Golden King. You are not a native of this continent, so there is no real meaning in occupying the treasure house. It is better to sell it to Golden King as a favor. This way, maybe he can help you find what you want. And then? Faceless One said, I admit that your method can achieve your goal, but it's also the same if you change it. If you continue to go on and become the administrator with the highest authority, there will be no secret in this treasure house for you. And if you seek refuge with Golden King, the consequences may not be what you want. Golden King regaining control of the treasure house means that he has his own foundation in his remnant soul state. Given time, resurrection may not be impossible. And a resurrected Golden King may not matter to you in the Far East, but what about your friend? Although the Night King's territory is not in the center of the continent, with Golden King's way of ruling, sooner or later, you will face his threat. What do you think will happen to the Night King's character? Of course, the jade will be broken and the tile will be intact. When has Aya ever taken the initiative to admit defeat in her life? However, that day will never come. Wang Lu smiled and wanted to speak, but then he remembered the rules here, so he remained silent. You can't lie, but I can't say it. Moreover, for Golden King, the experience of his remnant soul state is not enough for outsiders to know. No matter how great your contribution is, just by witnessing his ugliness with your own eyes, you have already committed the original sin. On the other hand, you have made great contributions to Golden King, but what can you get? A gratitude that can't possibly be sincere and a mere treasure. Don't you think it's ridiculous? Wang Lu lightly said, It's not ridiculous, at least not more ridiculous than your trivial spirit occupation. Faceless One said, Spirit occupation is just an appetizer, I can give you far more than that. Wang Lu said with a smile, based on the fact that you, a prisoner who can neither live nor die, can't? Faceless One said, based on the fact that I am the founder of the Priory of Zion. What? Wang Lu was shocked. He thought that the defeat of Faceless One was already in the past, but unexpectedly he could still play tricks. The founder of the Priory of Zion? Wasn't that one of the mortal enemies of Holy Light religion, the biggest opposition force hidden within the church, with a history of thousands of years? Faceless One was the church's knife that was deeply trusted by the Pope. Moreover, his debut was no more than 100 years ago, so he couldn't match the identity of the founder. Is it hard to understand? Faceless One said, Faceless One has indeed appeared in front of the world for only 100 years, but before Faceless One, there are too many identities. I can't even remember how many times I have reincarnated. Secondly, if I hadn't become a mad dog of the church and gained the deep trust of the Pope, do you think the Priory of Zion could survive under the suppression of Holy Light religion for thousands of years? Well, in that case it does seem to make some sense. In other words, the so-called biggest opposition force of Holy Light religion is just their own dog. Faceless One said, any large organization will have its own opposition voice. Even if everyone's belief is the same, people's hearts are still different. And internal division is often a precursor to the collapse of an organization. Those so-called organizations that are destroyed by geniuses are more often destroyed by themselves. Holy Light religion used the Priory of Zion to gather the opposition, sometimes suppressing, sometimes supporting, playing in the palm of their hands. Thus, Holy Light religion can stand tall for thousands of years. Good method. Wang Lu sincerely praised. Faceless One said, however, the Priory of Zion, as an opposition force that has lasted for thousands of years, is not just pretending to resist the church. All along, we have been waiting for a suitable opportunity to oust the current power holder and replace him. And now this opportunity has finally come. 80 years ago, Holy Light religion left its birthplace and moved the holy city to the king's treasure house. This is a very bold gamble. However, because of you, the church's foundation in the king's treasure house has been greatly shaken. Once the administrator's authority is taken away, the 100-year plan would go down the drain. At the same time, the church's strategic layout in the eastern region has also been disintegrated by the eastern cultivators. Instead of falling apart, the eastern city-states have become more closely united, and even allied with the intellectual city to oppose Holy Light religion. This can be said to be the most serious moment since the establishment of the church. There have been similar situations in the past, but at that time, when the foreign enemy came, Holy Light religion was unprecedentedly united. However, now, as long as you are willing to complete the deal with me, I can let the Priory of Zion be your help to overthrow the foundation of Holy Light religion's rule in the continent. Mobilize the Priory of Zion? Oh. Wang Lu asked, or do you think I will let you go? Faceless One said, I'm not that naive and my deal with you is not for my survival. The special structure of the Priory of Zion makes it unnecessary for me, the founder, to come forward. The one who will come forward to lead the organization is another person. Another person? Joan of Arc, you should have heard of her. Because when Rowan saw the Night King herself, he should have lamented her similarity to the Holy Woman. Wang Lu was even more surprised. What's the relationship between Joan of Arc and the Priory of Zion? Moreover, isn't she dead? She has never lived. Joan of Arc is just a fictional character. Her real identity is the body of the Night King. What? That's not strange, is it? The reason why the Night King's rule in Bretonnia fell apart, in addition to her own problem, the church's infiltration work has been indispensable. After the Night King's death, the church soon invaded Bretonnia, and I accidentally found her body. As a king whose realm was close to legendary, and whose real strength was more than the average legendary, her body did not collapse. Therefore I sealed it up. Later, the riot caused by Joan of Arc was actually directed by a few high-level members of the Priory of Zion, including me. At that time, the claimed purpose was to expose the decadence of Holy Light religion, to attract more talents to join the Priory, and to enhance the cohesion of the Priory. But in fact, it was just to bring down the two holy ones of the Church, the ones who, according to the rumor, made the decision to kill her. They used to be strong competitors for the Pope. However, after Joan of Arc's canonization, although they were not pursued, their prestige was greatly reduced, and there was no possibility for them to go further. Wang Lu asked, what happened to the Night King's body later? It was claimed that she was defeated and executed by the Holy One, but in fact, she was strictly sealed by the Church and guarded by the members of the Priory of Zion. Faceless One said, however, as long as they receive the correct password, the body will be unsealed and the Holy Woman will come back to life. The original intention of this move was to resurrect the Saintess when the prestige of the current Pope was damaged due to an accident. This was a method to strengthen the Pope's prestige in all aspects. Now it can be used by you. If I'm not mistaken, the real Night King is now in the state of spirit of the brave departed, right? If she can find her own body and unite her spirit and body, it is very likely that she would be able to cross the legendary boundary that she could never cross in the past. And once the Night King becomes a legend, her strength will have a tremendous change. Perhaps she would be able to stand side by side with the Pope and other top powerhouses in the continent. At the same time, she will get the full support of the Priory of Zion. Thousands of Holy Light believers and thousands of years of accumulated resources will be used by her. Her rule will be far above that of a mere Bretonia. Sounds good. Faceless One earnestly said, with the deep-rooted Holy Light religion in the Western continent, no matter how the crisis evolves, it is impossible to completely eradicate it. Even if the Holy Light religion retreats to the Western wilderness, its influence will remain in the original ruling area for a long time, which requires a new force to take over. And the Priory of Zion under the leadership of the Night King is the best choice. Wang Lu pondered for a moment. In other words, support a puppet regime? That sounds good, but I'm curious. You're busy but you can't exchange your life for it, so what's in it for you? I've never cared about my own life and death. Compared to the average person, I've lived for too long. Faceless One earnestly said, it's true that no matter how much I do, I can't live. However, the faith in Holy Light can flourish forever. Is this what you call flourish forever? Wang Lu sneered. The ruling layer has been replaced and reduced to a puppet, is this what you call flourish forever? Although Holy Light religion has suffered a blow, the faith in Holy Light can indeed continue to be passed on. Faceless One earnestly said, and for me nothing is more important than this. Nothing is more important than this. Wang Lu gently nodded as if deeply touched by Faceless One's awareness. In that case I choose to refuse. Chapter 352. Refuse? Faceless One was somewhat surprised by Wang Lu's refusal. What's the reason? Because I don't like you, so anything that's good for you, I will deal with it in reverse. That's it? Faceless One said, I didn't expect you to be so naive. Because of your momentary liking and disliking, you can even ignore the overall situation? Wang Lu sneered. The overall situation? Who do you think I am? You actually want to tempt me with benefits? Why do you talk about liking and disliking me? Listen clearly, my momentary liking and disliking are far more important than your so-called overall situation. I am a cultivator of 9 regions, not your Western continent profession. For me, understanding is far more important than worldly power and wealth. If you want to talk about benefits with me, you're looking for the wrong person. That's ridiculous. Faceless One angrily said, Wang Lu directly interrupted him. Enough, no need to say anything. Just wait for Golden King to resurrect, and then your Holy Light religion and Holy Light faith will be completely eradicated. To be honest, just hating Holy Light religion is enough for me to stand on the side of Golden King. After a long silence, Faceless One laughed wildly. You will regret it. You don't know what you've done. What will you lose? Since I don't know, why should I regret it? Let's talk about it when I know. Besides, let me borrow a saying from the ancient people, it's all very, very good, but I don't like it. As soon as his voice fell, the boundless darkness suddenly opened up, and a dazzling light lit up in front of him. The haze dispersed and Faceless One's voice suddenly disappeared. In his line of sight, the towering beautiful unique pool peak was already in front of him. And beside him Lu Li, Bai Shixian and Quan Zhuhua were still unconscious. Only their gentle breathing proved that they were in good condition. The only one who was a bit embarrassed was Aya. Because she didn't have time to fasten her seat belt, she fell and curled up on his leg. The place where he talked to Faceless One should be an independent space isolated by some spell. There the challengers would undergo a very strict test. It was so strict that many ancient sages and mighty figures were helpless. They had no choice but to resort to trickery and use the inertia of the war chariot to break through the trial area. So now, did Golden King's chariot, driven by inertia, carry them through the trial area? Or could it be that I completed the trial before the chariot broke through? Wang Lu curiously thought about it. In theory, since the others were still asleep and he was the only one awake, it should be the latter. However, he really didn't think that he deliberately did anything during the conversation with Faceless One. If it was a test, what was the test? But soon, his attention was attracted by the approaching beautiful unique pool peak. The towering mountain was like a majestic giant, bringing with it a suffocating pressure. Only by approaching it could one understand that the significance of this mountain was far more than just the end of the trial. He freed himself from the safety belt and reached out to control the chariot. He quickly climbed up the mountain, but the road was long. After an unknown amount of time, Wang Lu finally reached the peak. There, an unexpected person was waiting for him. The man stood on the top of the mountain, with his back against the golden sun above the sea of clouds, shining with golden light. However, when he got closer, he found that the dazzling golden light did not come from the distant sun, but from him. Under that unparalleled brilliance, even the sunlight was overshadowed. Golden King? Wang Lu was stunned as he got out of the chariot. Although he was stunned, he felt that it was not incomprehensible. Humph, in view of your achievements, I grant you the qualification to call me by my name and talk to me. Golden King raised his head high and gently cast his eyes down. Feel honored. You are the only mortal who has received this gift in tens of thousands of years. Wang Lu faintly smiled and nodded. Then, Golden King slightly lowered his head, and his eyes revealed considerable appreciation. You are the only one who has reached the top of the mountain in tens of thousands of years, except for me. Wang Lu was a bit surprised. Only 2 people? Then before Holy Light Religion? At the mention of Holy Light Religion, Golden King's face became very gloomy. A group of lowly bastards, do you think they deserve to touch beautiful unique pool peak? Wang Lu pondered and asked, in other words, they haven't really completed the 5th trial of the Champion's Trial? They have. Golden King said, the content of the Champion's Trial only stops at the foot of beautiful unique pool peak. As long as they can break through the Sea of Clouds and break through the last obstacle of the Sea of Clouds, they will pass. I will not set a test that is beyond the upper limit of the ability of my subordinates, but at the same time, I will not let filthy lowly people defile my beautiful unique pool peak. Wang Lu pondered and said, so, it's impossible to climb beautiful unique pool peak in an ordinary way? Like I said, it's strange to use the chariot to break through the last obstacle of the Sea of Clouds, and it should not be the right way. But if there is no chariot, we can't even leave the castle. Could it be that there is a problem with the rule that only by using the chariot to reach the finish line? That is not a natural rule of this place, but a group of lowly and ignorant bastards who think themselves clever. Golden King's tone was arrogant, belittling those who built the castle as worthless. However, when he turned around, he seriously explained to Wang Lu, beautiful unique pool peak is a trial left by the ancient gods to the human world. It is the starting point for the human world to reach the heaven. The Sea of Clouds at the foot of the mountain is the first test to screen the mortals. In the Sea of Clouds, there are all kinds of trials in the human world, which requires the trial taker to have excellent courage, wisdom, and perseverance. However, what really determines whether a person can break away from the mortal world and ascend to the heaven is the last obstacle in the Sea of Clouds. I have kept the first half of it as my champion's trial, because those who can pass the first half must be the most outstanding warriors in the world, and only the most outstanding warriors in the world are worthy of being the champion under my command. As for the last half, there is no need for them to try it. Wang Lu asked, what is the content of the last obstacle? I was pulled into a strange space and made a deal with someone, but it didn't come to an agreement. That is the content of your trial. Golden King said, there, you will get an irresistible opportunity to make a deal. As long as you suffer a little bit, you can get endless benefits, power, wealth, or beauty. And this deal is not an illusory illusion, it can really be realized. Wang Lu nodded slightly, expressing his approval. Just now, in the illusion, the conditions put forward by Faceless One didn't seem to be a lie. If he was willing to make a deal with him, the benefits that he could get were immeasurable. Even if Holy Light religion was severed, it was still a powerful first-rate organization in the Western continent. If placed in 9 regions, it was equivalent to Wang Lu having a high-rank immortal cultivation sect under his command. What Wang Lu needed to do was to pinch his nose and shake hands with Faceless One. After that, he would kill and bury those who should be killed and those who should be buried. There would be no impact just pinching his nose. However, Wang Lu didn't like it, so he refused. Moreover, it was a sincere refusal. Could it be that not knowing good from bad, disregarding gains and losses is the secret to pass the test? Wang Lu couldn't help but laugh. Golden King solemnly said, "Not wronging one's mind with the change of external things is the first step for a mortal to become a god." Wang Lu curiously said, "If that's the case, that kind of brainlessness and unhappiness are not uncommon in the world. So, why are there only 2 people who can pass the final test and come to beautiful unique Pool Peak?" Golden King said, "Can brainlessness and unhappiness pass the previous test of the Sea of Clouds? To be able to come here, one must be good at weighing the pros and cons, have a deep mind and be resourceful." Upon hearing this, Wang Lu couldn't help but interrupt, "I think none of the people in my car can realize these conditions that you said." Surprisingly, Golden King didn't care about Wang Lu's rudeness, but contemptuously said, "That's why they can't even open their eyes here, they are not qualified to witness this great mountain. They join the test as your subordinates. Even if they follow you to the end, they can only serve as a foil. So that's how it is." Golden King returned to the topic and said, "Only those who are resourceful and good at weighing the pros and cons can go to the end. However, the more intelligent and thoughtful the mortal bastards are, the more they can't resist the temptation of the last test. Therefore, I did not expect that you would actually be able to make it here." Wang Lu faintly smiled and said, "More or less I have some luck." Golden King said, "Then let me ask you a question. If you have a very important and close person who died, and the one who mastered the method of resurrection was a treacherous villain that you have always disdained to pay attention to, would you trade with him in exchange for the resurrection of your close person?" Wang Lu pondered for a long time and then said, "From my point of view, I don't like to do things by wronging my mind. If the one who mastered the method of resurrection is a treacherous villain, then he can master it, so I should be able to as well. I don't need to trade with him, I just need to find another way. However, I can't guarantee that if I encounter a similar situation, I can refuse every time. After all, there are too many things in the world that make people helpless." Golden King nodded, and his eyes showed more approval. "Yes, having the mind alone can't prove anything, but when you can stand at the peak of the mortal world, there will not be many situations that make you helpless. And at that time, whether you have the mind or not, will be the biggest dividing line between mortals and gods. After I conquered beautiful unique Pool Peak and the Sea of Clouds at the foot of the mountain, I put it in my treasure house as a part of my champion's trial. During this period, I simplified many of the tests in the Sea of Clouds. But even so, for tens of thousands of years, you are the only one who can come to me. You have indeed proved your qualification. You are no longer a lowly and incompetent bastard, so I will also fully show the generosity of a king." With that, Golden King stretched out his hand and grasped the void. A moment later, a square block slowly condensed in his hand. "This is my reward for you." Wang Lu stared at the block with some trepidation, thinking, could it be that my reward for breaking through the boundary between mortals and gods is the soap personally given by Golden King? Chapter 353. Your Majesty, how should I say this? Wang Lu hesitantly opened his mouth, his mind rapidly turning as he prepared his lines. For Golden King, although the legends about him were more negative than positive, such as being a tyrant, bloodthirsty, and he was obsessed with his friends in his early years. However, in the trial of the king's treasure house, Golden King's support as a friendly was unquestionable. Without Golden King's several secret help on the way to the trial, Wang Lu and his group of young cultivators who hadn't even gotten the king pill would have already turned into ashes in front of the several holy ones of Holy Light religion. Moreover, according to historical records, those who could be so favored by Golden King were almost unique in his 10,000 years of rule. However, it was really difficult to bear the grace of a beauty. Golden King was indeed great, but he was not on that side. Your Majesty, I am indebted to you, but I am not the kind of person you think I am. Golden King felt a bit strange. What? You don't want it? I thought you, the cultivators of 9 regions, came here mainly for this thing. Wang Lu was suddenly stunned. When he took a closer look, he couldn't help but exclaim, "What the F***ck? The cube in Golden King's hand was not the imaginary soap with infinite information, but a simple and unadorned key imprinted with the ancient characters of 9 regions. Speaking of the key, a guess suddenly flashed through Wang Lu's mind, and it was also the only guess. Not only him, the entire Wanxian League of 9 regions cultivators came to the western continent for this key. The key to the group of immortal tombs. Sure enough, it's here? Wang Lu gently sighed. His own guess was finally confirmed. The key to the group of immortal tombs was indeed in the king's treasure house. Although there were still too many questions such as how did the key to the group of immortal tombs fall into the hands of Golden King, the key was already in front of him, so those questions were no longer important. However, Wang Lu did not have much joy or sense of accomplishment. Compared with this key to the group of immortal tombs, everything he did in the western continent was far more significant. So much so that for a while he couldn't even think of this key. After experiencing so many ups and downs in the king's treasure house, the final result was this key? Wang Lu could not help but be somewhat stunned. While Wang Lu was stunned and silent, Golden King had thrown the key to Wang Lu. Take it, this is your reward. Wang Lu nodded and calmly accepted the key. The so-called thunder, rain, and dew were the grace of the monarch. The key to the group of immortal tombs was much better than the golden soap, so he had no reason to refuse. As for the others? A person could not be too greedy. The reason why the Holy Light religion people were deprived of their administrator authority and disintegrated their ruling foundation, in the final analysis, was it not because they were too greedy? In the beginning, they must have won some of the favor of Golden King, which allowed them to become the administrator of the Golden King's treasure house. However, later on, they betrayed the trust of Golden King, regarded the king's treasure house as their own property, and wantonly manipulated it, which finally aroused the wrath of Golden King. Even though they were just wisps of remnant souls, they could still use other people's hands to inflict heavy damage to Holy Light religion. However, having said that, the choice of Paul as the administrator was also a foreshadowing of Golden King. Otherwise, if it were Faceless One, Ferdinand, Wang Lu, and the others, they might not be able to take advantage of the loophole so easily. The so-called Emperor's scheme was really imperceptible. While thinking about these trivial things, Wang Lu sighed and said, "Next." Golden King said, "Next, there's nothing for you to do here. Take your men and leave." Wang Lu froze for a moment and then nodded. The so-called "nothing for you to do here" probably referred not only to the king's treasure house, but to the entire western continent. After helping Golden King to abolish the current administrator, Paul, the recovery of Golden King was only a matter of time. Although he didn't know the reason why he fell into a deep sleep for tens of thousands of years, the western continent would certainly be turbulent because of him. And during this period, Golden King would never welcome a group of people from another continent to disturb him. As for Wang Lu himself, although he had indeed made a stunning contribution and won the favor of Golden King, both Wang Lu and Golden King were very clear that this was just a temporary phenomenon. However, whether it was Wang Lu or Golden King, both were very clear that this was just a temporary phenomenon. With Wang Lu's character, he was not willing to be under others. The attitude of a subject was just that. If the two of them got along for a long time, they would certainly make an offense that Golden King could not tolerate. At that time, Wang Lu would have to face an opponent whose power was comparable to that of a god, and Golden King had no choice but to personally destroy the talent that he admired. Therefore, instead of waiting for that scene to happen, it was better to avoid it in advance. After all, the western continent was not Wang Lu's hometown. He had to go back to where he came from. This trip to the west was already long enough. Give me a month to finish it. Wang Lu was silent for a moment. After calculating the things that he could not immediately leave behind in the western continent, he opened his mouth and said, "Golden King fully demonstrated the generosity of a king." He said, "I want a complete resuscitation which will take 3 months. That's enough. I'll take my leave." Wang Lu said, looked around and then helplessly asked, "Where is the exit?" Golden King smiled and pointed to the ground under their feet. "Here." The next moment, the ground collapsed, revealing a dark and bottomless crack. Looking at it from above, they saw the towering, beautiful, unique Pool Peak, the symbol of the peak of the mortal world, the starting point of the god realm, in front of Wang Lu's eyes, like a jade pillar breaking from the middle. When the rocks cracked, the whole world was distorted. The blue and endless sky, as well as the boiling sea of clouds at the foot of the mountain, all rushed toward the center. The front of Golden King seemed to be the center of a huge whirlpool, sucking everything around him in. Wang Lu only felt that everything in front of him went black, and then the scene changed into a blue sky and white clouds. Wang Lu resisted the dizziness in his head, operated his non-phase immortal heart to stabilize his mind, and then swept his eyes around. Taba City? In the distance, there was a condescending, magnificent and sacred building complex. Located at the highest point of the city, surrounded by holy light, wasn't it the holy cathedral in the center of the city? However, in addition to the cathedral that was still lit up with holy light, Taba City had undergone earth-shattering changes. The last time he entered Taba City, Wang Lu was led by the personal guard of the Master of Deep Earth City. At that time, the group was secretive, trembling with fear, and didn't stay in the city for too long. However, the bustling atmosphere of Taba City still left a deep impression. Even though Taba City has become the private property of Holy Light religion, it still carried the dream of millions of people in the continent. From all places, all levels of professions gathered here and bravely broke into the king's city. Some got the appreciation of Golden King and became rich. Some died in the treasure house and became the treasure house's guardian, the Golden King's servant. Risk and reward coexisted. This was the dream place of professions in the Western continent. Taba City used to be crowded with people. Some people joked that if you threw a few stones upstairs, you could hit a few middle-order or even high-order professions. And what followed these professions here was a larger and more prosperous industrial chain. However, looking at it now, there was a bleak atmosphere in the city. On both sides of the spacious street, the shops that once endlessly hawked their wares have all closed down. The heavy traffic in front of the door has become deserted, and the breeze stirred up the floating dust, which showed a somber atmosphere. Is this, the devil has entered the village? While in a state of consternation, Wang Lu heard a moan behind him. I'm so sleepy, where is this? Wang Lu's reaction was as fast as lightning. He reached into his mustard seed bag, took out the pie, and then stuffed the speaker's mouth with his backhand. Luli, eat your food and talk less. By the way, wake up the others and let them be quiet. It stood to reason that after the end of a pleasant cooperative relationship with Golden King's mind, he would never set up such a low-class scheme to murder Wang Lu. However, this was, after all, the base camp of Holy Light religion, so with their identity they could not be too blatant. While Lu Li was eating and waking up the others, Wang Lu found a haggard middle-aged man on the street. He looked like a local resident of Taba City. However, unlike the cheerful and enthusiastic appearance of most of the locals at this time, he seemed to be full of worry. Wang Lu took a few steps forward and stopped him, ready to ask what happened in the city. However, just as he came to the front of the man, he suddenly heard a loud thunder-like sound from the distance of the city. 3 days have passed, Holy Light religion bastards, come out. Because the sound that swept over was too strong, and the sound wave was wrapped in shocking power, for a moment, Wang Lu's primordial spirit trembled and his jade mansion buzzed. It was too late for him to identify the owner of the sound, he only felt that it was vaguely familiar. However, even though Wang Lu couldn't respond, it didn't mean that others couldn't. When Lu Li heard the sound, she absent-mindedly threw away the pie in her hand and said in surprise, "Uncle Tianyu?" Wang Lu didn't react for a while. "Uncle? When did Spirit Sword Mountain transfer an elder?" "No, it's Supreme Tianyu from Xingjing sect." "Supreme Tianyu?" Wang Lu suddenly remembered the Supreme Tianyu, who was known as the Mad Dog of Xingjing sect. In the past, when they met in the ancient sword tomb, Supreme Tianyu's Mad Dog attitude left a deep impression on him. Unexpectedly, he met this Mad Dog in a foreign land. However, upon careful thought, it was not strange to meet Tianyu. Since the news that the key to the group of immortal tombs might be lost in the western continent spread out, the major forces of the Wanxian League have sent their cultivators there. And the team representing the excavation management, which was also the official team of the Wanxian League, was led by the sect leader of Spirit Sword Sect, Feng Yin, accompanied by Supreme Tianyu and several other big shots. Such a luxurious lineup, whether it was analysis or action, was far superior to any other sect's team, not something that Wang Lu's group of young people could compare with. However, because the lineup was too luxurious, they did not trust each other, and their efficiency was inevitably low. Coupled with their official identity, they had to follow the rules in every move, which made the progress even slower. However, no matter how slow it was, it had been several months since the 9 Regions Wanxian League's expedition to the western continent. Feng Yin's team had been on an expedition to the capital of knowledge a long time ago. There, they should have found enough evidence to prove that the key to the group of immortal tombs was lost in the king's treasure house. The subsequent development was not difficult to guess. Obviously, the Wanxian League could not persuade Holy Light religion to open the door of the treasure house and let them look for the key. Moreover, Holy Light religion's strategy in the eastern city-states had offended the people of 9 regions, so the conflict between the two sides was inevitable. It was just that, contrary to Wang Lu's expectation, the strong people of the Wanxian League were too heaven-defying. In just a few months, they actually killed their way to the headquarters of Holy Light religion. Chapter 354. 3 days have passed. Are you going to obediently open the city gate by yourself? Or do you want me to personally open the gate for you? A thunderous explosion swept through the city, and the mad dog roar of Supreme Tianyu changed the color of the sky. The clear sky was suddenly covered with dark clouds, and the holy dome of the Holy Cathedral of Holy Light religion was also covered with a layer of haze. Seeing this scene, Wang Lu sighed with emotion that the name of Xingjing Mad Dog was indeed well deserved. Supreme Tianyu was an elder of Unity stage, so his strength was indeed not weak, but according to the cultivation level of the 2 continents, he was nothing more than the legendary level. Even if he came from a famous sect and his real strength was a bit higher than his cultivation level, it was only at the level of Aya, far from enough to have a head-on confrontation with the Holy Light religion, let alone running to their door to clamor for a fight. However, Tianyu was really that arrogant. Previously in the ancient sword tomb, when he saw his mad dog biting people, he was certainly annoyed, but now that they were in the same trench, facing the same opponent, the mad dog roar of Tianyu sounded so sweet. Pitiful non-believer, the glory of the holy light cannot be blasphemed by anyone. Suddenly, the holy dome of the holy cathedral shot out a platinum-colored beam of light straight into the sky, piercing through the thick dark clouds. Behind the dark clouds, the light poured down, illuminating the surroundings. An old man wearing a white robe and a golden-red cloak, holding a curved scepter, slowly walked out from the entrance of the holy cathedral. Although his pace was slow, each step crossed a long distance. Treading on the void, he climbed up the stairs and within 3 steps, he stood at a height of 1 kilometer. As he walked, the light that fell from the sky gradually converged and resonated with the old man and the holy city of Taba below him. The holy light on the ground and the holy light in the sky converged together, creating a holy ring in the sky. In the blink of an eye, it spread for hundreds of miles, and within the scope of the ring, all living things were revived and full of vitality. At the same time, in the holy city, many closed doors were opened, and the haggard residents came to the streets, worshipping the vision in the sky. And from their exclamation, Wang Lu learned the identity of the person in the sky. The leader of the Holy Light religion, the Pope Billy III, who stood at the peak of the hundreds of millions of Holy Light believers. Although he has been the enemy of Holy Light religion for a long time, this was the first time that he saw the leader of the church. Pope Billy III was not a dignified leader, but, even a dog, if the holy light from the sky and the earth converged in one place, and the light shone in all directions, it would appear endlessly majestic. Wang Lu had already faced the Holy One of the Church in the king's treasure house, but that was a defective product with most of their power suppressed by the sea of clouds. But now what he saw was the power of the legendary Holy One who had reached the peak of the continent. Moreover, he didn't even try to cover it up. Looking at the waves of holy light sweeping around, Wang Lu really wanted to thank the Golden King for sending him to Taba City. The strength of a real legendary Holy One was far beyond imagination. Were it not for the resonance between the Holy City and the Pope, making it unaffected by the waves of holy light, the Pope's breath alone was enough to purify him, the Eastern heretic. Even if his non-phase sword defense was famous for being good at defense, it still could not offset the huge power gap between him and the Pope. Such an opponent, even if he looked up at him, it would be enough to blind his dog eyes, not to mention a direct confrontation. At least, Wang Lu never wanted to face such an enemy no matter what. However, right now he didn't need to worry about how to deal with the Pope. The mad dog Tianyu had taken the initiative to bite the hardest bone in the Western continent. Thus, what Wang Lu needed to do was to be a strong onlooker. TSK, the #1 legendary person in the Western continent against the #1 mad dog in the 9 regions. This scene, this lineup, if I don't take out my treasured props for many years, it would be unjustifiable. While saying that, Wang Lu took out his treasured props from his mustard seed bag. A large barrel of honey grapefruit tea, a large bag of popcorn and a small folding stool. He then found a shady place to sit down. Relying on his amazing eyesight as a cultivator, he was able to see the changes in the sky. On one side was the Pope Billy III, who was backed by the Holy City and had the surging power of holy light. On the other side was the lone Supreme Tianyu, who was treading on dark clouds. The two of them looked at each other across the sky, both of them restrained themselves. However, the confrontation of momentum gradually unfolded. It stood to reason that the strength of Supreme Tianyu should be slightly inferior to the Pope. However, at this time he was facing the Pope. His raging demonic power filled the air, which once again gathered the dark clouds that had just been dispersed. The dark clouds were as thick as a blanket, making the holy city of the church look like a lonely island in the sea. For a time, the momentum of Supreme Tianyu was not at a disadvantage. Interesting, in the end, the division of strength between 9 regions and Western continent is wrong. The so-called legendary level is not as powerful as imagined. Or did Tianyu have a breakthrough recently? A few months ago, when they met in the ancient sword tomb, Tianyu had just entered the unity stage. Conversely, he was only one step away from the peak deity stage. Although he was much luckier than the countless cultivators who were trapped in the peak deity stage since ancient times, to go one step further was as difficult as ascending to the sky. Could it be that easy for Tianyu to make a breakthrough? Forget it, it's useless to think too much. Let's just wait and see. Wang Lu shook his head and beckoned Aya and the others, who had just been woken up by Lu Li, to sit down with him. Aya, Lu Li, little Bai, quickly sit down, the good show is about to begin. Do you want some popcorn? Aya waved her hand and politely refused. Her complexion was dignified. Obviously, she was not in the mood to watch the show and eat the popcorn. Wang Lu knew that she probably experienced something in the last pass in the Sea of Clouds. Her mood was very complicated, so he didn't force her. In any case, Lu Li was next to him, so he didn't need to worry about selling the popcorn. Sure enough, as soon as Lu Li sat down next to him, her soft body leaned over, her small head poked into Wang Lu's chest and said, "Senior brother, I want to eat popcorn, can you feed me?" "Feed you? What are you doing by yourself?" Wang Lu said as he turned his head. He found that Lu Li's left hand was holding a cup of hot honey pomelo tea, but her right hand was disabled and couldn't hold it, so she could only ask Wang Lu for help. Wang Lu helplessly sighed. "Can't you put down the cup in your left hand? You're stupider than a bear." Then he reached out to grab a few popcorn and put it into the girl's mouth. Lu Li smiled sweetly and dexterously licked off the honey on Wang Lu's finger with the tip of her tongue. Wang Lu suddenly felt that this girl seemed to be more like a pet than Quanzhou Hua. Then he heard a woman's voice from the other side, "Yo, so considerate, I want it too." Wang Lu couldn't help but laugh. He didn't expect that Lu Li's disease was contagious. Even the well-behaved Xiaobai was. "Hey, this isn't Xiaobai's voice, right?" Turning his head, Wang Lu was surprised to see a very familiar face. Soft and lazy big eyes, a pure face without any makeup, a neat ponytail, and a pure white dress that seemed to never be changed for 100,000 years. It was none other than. The woman smiled sweetly, reached out and put a popcorn in her mouth. "Long time no see." Wang Lu swallowed with some difficulty and reluctantly said, "Long time no see indeed, master." Suddenly, the one who appeared next to Wang Lu was his master, the 5th elder of Lingjian school. "Why are you here?" After a brief moment of consternation, Wang Lu immediately asked. If he remembered correctly, his master did propose to join the excavation management's Western expedition team. However, she was quickly rejected by the sect leader. The reason was that he was afraid that she would do something shameful in the Western continent, which would implicate the sect and even the reputation of the 9 regions Wanxian League. How come now? Upon hearing her disciple's question, Wang Wu snorted, reached out her hand, took out a folding chair from Wang Lu's mustard seed bag, spread it out, and then sat down. She then sneered and said, "Not only me. This time there are a lot of people from the Wanxian League. Even the barbarian guerrillas of Royal Soldier Sect have come, so how could sect leader control me?" What exactly happened in the past few months? In the past few months, Wang Lu spent most of his time in Dragon City, so he was relatively isolated from the news. He only knew that a lot of cultivators from 9 regions had gathered in the east, and then formed an alliance with the local people to crusade against Holy Light religion. However, he didn't expect that the Wanxian League would actually send a large number of reinforcements. His master spread out her hands. "Isn't this obvious? It's an all-out war." "All-out war? How could it be so serious?" His master looked up at the sky and then nodded. "It seems like the two of them still have to show off for a while. Since I have time, I'll tell you about it." After listening to his master's simple narration, Wang Lu realized that in the past few months, the situation in the Western continent had changed constantly. Although his adventure in the Dragon City and the King's Treasure House was wonderful, it was still far from being the protagonist. In simple terms, what happened was like this. With the Excavation Management's Western Continent Expeditionary Force crossing the sea to the west, the Western Continent seemed to have become a dreamy land full of treasures. For a time, cultivators from various sects in 9 regions came one after another. However, when people arrived at the Western Continent, they found that it was far from as beautiful as they expected. Not to mention the wall of law and other issues, just the holy light religion in the eastern city-states instigated the hunting teams against the cultivators of 9 regions, which caused the cultivators of 9 regions to suffer heavy losses and complain incessantly. For example, the Excavation Management's Western Continent Expeditionary Force was naturally not affected. However, many of the teams from the small sects were simply wiped out. The design and dissemination of the Bloodstained Scroll by Holy Light Religion was initially just to separate the long-term cooperative relationship between the eastern city-states and 9 regions. However, when more and more 9 regions cultivators died under the Bloodstained Scroll, the seriousness of the problem went out of control. In the beginning, the focus of the anger of the 9 regions' people was the eastern city-states. After all, people died in the territory of the eastern city-states, so the responsibility could not be shirked. However, the eastern people of course did not want to bear the responsibility of so many lives, so they frankly said that everything was a conspiracy of Holy Light Religion. However, the people of Holy Light Religion did it very cleanly and did not leave any reliable evidence. The eastern city-states and 9 regions cultivators have jointly investigated for a long time, but they still could not find anything. Thus, the eastern people suddenly suffered in silence. And just when the situation was in a mess, the matter reached the ears of the Excavation Management's Expeditionary Force. Of course, this team represented the Wuxia League, which was the most authoritative and official 9 regions team in the Western Continent. When those small sects were wronged and had no one to reason with, they could only seek help from the Expeditionary Force. It just so happened that Feng Yin, who led the team, went alone to the capital of knowledge. The temporary leader of the team was the representative of Xingjing's sect, Supreme Tianyu. After Tianyu learned the ins and outs of the matter, he burst into laughter and said, "Can't find the murderer? You bunch of idiots, isn't that simple? Come with me." With that, he went straight to the largest church of Holy Light Religion in the Eastern Continent, Stormwind City. The monster blade fell from the sky and massacred the entire city, as well as the tens of thousands of soldiers and civilians in the city. If you can't find the murderer, then kill all the Western Continent people. The murderer is always among these people. Chapter 355. Over the past few months, many people have speculated that if Feng Yin did not leave the team and continued to control the overall situation, things would have developed differently. Unfortunately, there were not that many ifs in the world. Supreme Tianyu massacred the city with his demon knife, tens of thousands of civilians were plunged into misery and suffering. When this matter came out, the whole continent was shocked, and the reputation of the 9 regions people also fell to the bottom. However, this was followed by the attention on the Bloodstained Scroll. After all, this was the starting point of everything. Even a mad dog like Tianyu would not massacre a city for no reason. After cutting down Storm City, Tianyu left a bloody cloud in the sky above Storm City. The cloud formed a line of words: "Blood vengeance can only be washed away with blood." In the Western Continent, there were many people who understood the language of 9 regions. After these words were translated and spread, people came to know that there was such a story behind the massacre. When the eyes of the whole continent were focused on this matter, the situation of Holy Light Religion became particularly difficult. No matter how beautiful their work was, no matter how clean their hands were, they could not resist the investigation of the whole world. Soon, countless clues were dug out, and all the evidence pointed to Holy Light Religion. For this kind of thing, people did not blame the Holy Light Religion for being despicable and sinister. Any large organization would inevitably do some dirty things in the dark, especially religious organizations which were even more sanctimonious. However, if they were caught doing bad things, then they could only blame themselves for being stupid. Holy Light Religion also suffered in silence. How could they be willing to make this matter known to the whole world? It was just that things changed too fast for them to react. When the Bloodstained Scroll was first designed, the expeditionary force of the Wuxia League Excavation Management had not yet been formally established, and Holy Light Religion only targeted those individual cultivators. Who would have thought that not long after the Bloodstained Scroll strategy was set, a large number of 9 regions people swarmed in? The Holy Light Religion organization was bloated, so unless it was a matter of life and death for the church, the efficiency of the implementation of the decision was not high. Thus, they did not respond in the first place. By the time Tianyu massacred the whole world, it was already too late. When 9 regions cultivators went to the western continent to massacre a city, it would inevitably cause a strong backlash from the whole continent. However, after Holy Light religion was caught, things became delicate. After a complicated brewing, the forces of the western continent finally acquiesced that the two sides would deal with it alone. The rest of the forces would not help Holy Light religion, let alone the people of 9 regions. More or less, there was a sense of beating a drowning dog. The occupation of Taba City by Holy Light religion has, after all, somewhat angered the public. In short, the next development was the grievance between Holy Light religion and the people of 9 regions. On the 9 regions side, under the leadership of the Mad Dog Tianyu, they pressed forward step by step, completely ignoring the disadvantage of time and place. In particular, Supreme Tianyu himself, regardless of the identity or the rules, regardless of whether the opponent was strong or weak, as long as they belonged to Holy Light religion, he would kill them without mercy. The number of people who died under his monster knife was in the tens of thousands. Under this Mad Dog offensive, the people of 9 regions destroyed hundreds of churches in one fell swoop and beheaded more than 10 archbishops. Holy Light religion was shocked. After the shock came the counterattack. Although Holy Light religion was initially caught off guard, they were, after all, the most powerful force in the Western continent with deep heritage. Once they recovered, their fierce counterattack was not something that the scattered soldiers of 9 regions could match. Overnight, they laid an inescapable net in the eastern front line. On the second day, more than 109 regions cultivators fell, many of which were King Pill's Yuanying stage and above experts. Seeing that the situation was bad, it was still Supreme Tianyu who bravely stepped forward. This Unity stage expert once again displayed the Mad Dog spirit, abandoning his fellow cultivators to go deep into the enemy line alone. Relying on his profound cultivation base, he slaughtered his way in and out of the Holy Light religion territory. During this period, regardless of whether it was soldiers or civilians, he killed anyone he saw. Within 3 days he massacred more than 100,000 people. To deal with a Holy One, the only way was to dispatch a Holy One. However, at this time 2 of the 5 Holy Ones of Holy Light religion were held back in the king's treasure house, while the remaining 1 must guard the border and could not move. The remaining 2, the Pope and the Prophet, could not leave the holy city to personally chase after a mad dog. However, Tianyu's crazy killing also aroused the anger of the Western continent people. Several neutral legendary level powerhouses joined forces to intercept him and finally blocked him. However, at this time, the support of the 9 regions people also arrived. Led by Xingjing's sect, the 5 uniques of the Wanxian League came to the Western continent. As many as 5 Supreme of Unity stage came to the Western continent, and the rest were countless Deity stage and Yuanying stage. Naturally, such a force was far inferior to the entire Western continent. However, it was difficult for any single party in the Western continent to match them. Unlike the 9 regions, the Western continent did not have a Wanxian League that could unite tens of thousands of cultivators. In a situation where the Western continent people were still in a state of disunity, an all-out war with the 9 regions cultivators would only result in a lose-lose situation. Not to mention that the 9 regions people also had the power of the eastern city-states, so the scale could not be ignored. Therefore, the issue had to be pushed back to the negotiation table. There were 2 conditions for the 9 regions people. The first was to open the king's treasure house and let the 9 regions people look for the key to the group of immortal tombs. The second was that Holy Light religion must pay the price for the previous hunting of the 9 regions cultivators. However, Holy Light religion could not agree to these 2 conditions. The key to the group of immortal tombs was locked in the king's treasure house, and the king's treasure house was the foundation of the Holy Light religion, so how could they easily show it to others? As for the hunting of the 9 regions cultivators, if Holy Light religion had to pay the price for this, how could Supreme Tianyu pay for the 100,000 deaths? If you want us to agree to this condition, you have to tie up that evildoer Tianyu and send him to the altar to be purified by the sea of Holy Light. However, how could Supreme Tianyu agree to this condition? Regarding the condition of Holy Light religion, Tianyu laughed wildly. Sure, let your Pope, Prophet and so on come out naked. Let me chop off their heads one by one with my dog-head broadsword. Then I will be captured without a fight and accept your purification. If this kind of wrangling continued, it would be endless. Finally, it was Feng Yin who came forward to negotiate the conditions. Since this matter is difficult to satisfy both sides, and should not be completely resorted to force, then let's use a compromise method. Feng Yin said, 3 days later, under the holy city of your holy light religion, we will be on one side and holy light religion on the other. We are on one side and holy light religion on the other side. Each side will send out 3 people to fight one-on-one. If we are lucky enough to win all 3 fights, then please agree to our 2 conditions. If we win 2 and lose 1, then we will not owe each other anything. We will immediately withdraw from the Western continent and no longer attempt to dip our fingers into your sect's treasure house. But if we lose both times, then we will be at your disposal. Whether you want to kill or dismember, do as you please. This was one of the unique cultures of 9 regions. After some discussion, Holy Light Religion didn't immediately agree to it, but they also didn't refuse it. From the point of view of the conditions, Holy Light Religion was still relatively favorable. As long as they could win 1 fight, they would be able to solve the immediate crisis. If they could win 2 fights, they would win a great victory. If it was a one-on-one fight, there might be suspense for others, but the strength of Pope Billy III was beyond doubt. Both of them were legendary powerhouses, but the Pope seemed to be in another realm, high and mighty. However, the people of 9 regions were cunning. Moreover, this kind of competition seemed to be a fair one-on-one fight, but in essence, it was a one-on-one fight between Holy Light Religion and the Wanxian League of 9 regions. With the vastness of 9 regions, there would always be a powerhouse with strength similar to the Pope. If the other side sent out 3 popes, how could Holy Light Religion fight? Oh, please rest assured that the candidates on our side are limited to the first batch of expeditionary army. Those who come later to support us will not participate. If that was the case, Holy Light Religion still had some confidence. In the first batch of expeditionary army, there was only 1 Tianyu in the unity stage. The next strongest were Feng Yin in the peak deity stage and a deity stage elder of Kunlun Immortal sect. As long as Holy Light Religion sent out the Pope and the Prophet, their odds of winning would be more than 70%. And then you saw it. 3 days later, Tianyu came to scold us. Tiske, the advantage of a mad dog is that he is always full of energy. In Holy Light City, Wang Wu was eating Wang Lu's collection of honey popcorn while sighing with emotion at Tianyu's mad dog spirit. Wang Lu frowned and said, "Is Tianyu that awesome? When I first saw him in the ancient sword tomb, I felt that he was somewhat like a human. Even though he was arrogant, he still followed the rules. Is he showing his true colors here? Even after killing 100,000 people, he is not afraid of the divine tribulation? Could it be that he has entered the devil path?" Wang Wu sneered and said, "The law in Western continent is different. There is no merit and virtue karma, so how could there be a divine tribulation? At most, it would be because he killed too many people, causing the heart demon to appear. However, with Tianyu's temperament, even if he killed 10 million people, it would not arouse his heart demon. He is originally a demon cultivator, so he has a very subtle sense of propriety. As for him following the rules in 9 regions, that is because if he doesn't follow the rules, he will die. However, in Western continent, he is unfamiliar with the people and the place. No matter how exaggerated he is, at worst he could just leave and return to 9 regions. Could the Western continent people chase him across the sea? Would the 9 regions people blame him because he killed a group of Western continent barbarians? Since there is no responsibility to bear, of course he would reveal his true colors. Wang Lu sighed with emotion. This idea is not wrong. Moreover, fortunately this mad dog can let us quickly grasp the initiative. Although Tianyu's unscrupulous behavior in Western continent shocked many people, after calming down and analyzing, it was not difficult to find that it was because of Tianyu's 2 crazy killings. One was in Stormwind City, and the other was in the hinterland of Holy Light Religion, which quickly established the strategic advantage of 9 regions. It was difficult to say whether this was Tianyu's intention or the will of heaven, but it did make him a great contribution. Do you think so? Wang Wu turned her head and looked at her disciple with a smile. There was a sense of examination in her eyes. You don't have any other idea? Wang Lu pondered for a moment and said, I must say I am curious. When Tianyu first massacred a city, it just so happened that Uncle Sect Leader went to the Knowledge City alone, which gave Tianyu the opportunity. But with Sect Leader's steady temperament, would he leave such a big window for a mad dog? From another point of view, when the situation finally fell into a deadlock, Sect Leader came forward to negotiate and agreed to solve the problem with a duel. During this period, Tianyu unexpectedly did not object and completely accepted it. It's hard to imagine that it's a coincidence that he is so well behaved. Wang Wu nodded. It seems that after indulging in sensual pleasures in Western continent, you haven't been completely emptied out by wine and women. Your brain is still functioning. Master is reluctantly gratified. Damn, who told you that I indulged in sensual pleasures? You didn't? Wang Wu blinked her eyes and then looked at Lu Li and Aya for a long time. It's rare for you to be alone with them for a long time in a foreign country, yet, you actually didn't push them down? Push your sister? Wang Wu looked at her disciple with a bit of shock. Or, after not seeing each other for a while, disciple, have you become a person from that side? Wang Lu thought about Golden King's soap not long ago and sighed with emotion. Or perhaps you encountered a strong enemy here and were seriously injured, resulting in an unspeakable problem? If that's the case, you can rest assured that Master carries an emergency medicine bag with me, which will ensure that the medicine will be cured. Just as Wang Lu was about to say something, suddenly a strange light flashed in the sky. Supreme Tianyu and Pope Billy finally started their fight. Chapter 356. In the long history of the Western continent, the battle of legendary rank was not common. Once one entered the legendary rank, it was equivalent to stepping into a whole new field. In the ancient times, when the barrier between the mortal world and the heaven was not so deep, the legendary rank was called the first step to become a god. And with the opportunity to become a god who would be willing to fight to the death. Not to mention the battle of legendary rank was too far-reaching. A little bit of carelessness could cause the land to sink, volcanoes to erupt, rivers to flow backward, and people to be plunged into misery and suffering. Although there was no heavenly tribulation in the Western continent, the special cultural tradition and the law of power made the barrier between the Western continent profession and ordinary people not so deep. Therefore, even the legendary rank would have many treasured people in the mortal world, which became their fetters. For the people of the Western continent, it has been a long time since they saw the legendary level experts go all out in a fight. In the past 100 years, although there were many fights between legendary level experts, they were basically superficial, and no one would come out with their real skills. But now, whether it was Pope Billy or Supreme Tianyu, neither of them would hide even the slightest bit. Because hiding was the same as courting death. Although this one-on-one duel was designed by Feng Yin based on the spirit of humanity to avoid excessive casualties, it was still a bloody and cruel war with no warmth. In the first round of the fight, the two sides were already angry. The first one to make a move was Tianyu. During the long confrontation of breath, Tianyu realized that the Pope was backed by the Holy City and had a powerful momentum, so he could not take any advantage. Therefore, he simply released the monster blade in his hand to seize the initiative. This weapon, which was comparable to an immortal treasure, suddenly expanded thousands of times, like a continuous mountain range pressing down from the sky. Seeing this situation, the Pope's complexion could not help but change. Because although Tianyu's blade seemed slow and clumsy, he could not avoid it. Because Tianyu's blade was aimed at the Taba city behind the Pope. After the bewitching blade expanded thousands of times, when this blade slashed down, there was no need to add any special magic power. Just the size and weight of the blade could destroy a city and destroy a country. Although the sacred city had a spell to protect the city, it could not withstand such a powerful and heavy blade. However, as the leader of the church, how could the Pope be so easy to deal with? His expression changed. He was shocked that his opponent was still so despicable and shameless at this time, but it wasn't that he didn't have a way to deal with it. On the contrary, this kind of powerful and heavy attack was exactly what he wanted. In terms of strength, who could compare with the Holy Light religion that had hundreds of millions of believers? The Pope was the leader of millions of believers and he was backed by the Holy City. He was confident that he would be able to fight even if the gods were to descend to earth, let alone a mere mad dog. Heretics, repent under the Holy Light. When the heavenly moon demon blade was about to reach the top of his head, the Pope raised the staff that symbolized supreme authority high up. Although it was silent, the mountain-like demon blade suddenly stopped in mid-air, unable to slash down even half an inch. However, the Pope's complexion changed again because this saber was blocked too easily. The demon's saber only had the appearance, but its true power was far from what it looked like on the surface. With the strength of Supreme Tianyu, he should not be strong in appearance but weak in reality. The Pope immediately pushed his cane upwards. The huge demon blade could not withstand it and retreated with a rumbling sound. However, after the demon blade retreated, people discovered that Supreme Tianyu, who was hiding behind the demon blade, had disappeared without a trace. Could it be that he escaped? In the Holy City, the priests that gathered near the Holy Cathedral whispered to themselves, and then watched the first round of the fight between the two supreme powerhouses with trepidation. Although the two sides did not show their real ability, and could only be regarded as a preliminary test, it was still hair-raising. None of the priests in the holy city believed that the Pope would lose. However, in the face of the demon blade that was even bigger than the holy city, how could they not be afraid when they were in the holy city, in the shadow of the demon blade? Therefore, if Tianyu escaped, the fight would end here and that would be the best. Unfortunately, how could things be that simple? How could a mad dog cultivator who dared to slaughter hundreds of thousands of people in a foreign land escape? After throwing out the demon blade to divert attention, Tianyu disappeared without a trace. The Pope was not in a hurry to pursue. Instead, he held his cane and muttered something. A moment later, an astonishing light wave spread out in a spherical shape, which, in a twinkling of an eye, spread out to hundreds of miles away. Wherever the light wave passed, people felt as if they had been seen through from the beginning to the end, and there was no longer any secret about them. Wang Lu and the others in Taba City were also within the range of the light wave. Fortunately, the fifth elder of Spirit Sword Sect was here. He pointed his emerald green bamboo sword toward the sky, and the light wave of the Pope bypassed them and didn't sweep them. Wang Lu was secretly surprised. Although the light wave just now was just casually released by the Pope, his master sword also didn't accumulate any power. It was also casually released, yet it could easily break the spell of a legendary level Holy One. This guy? Oh, he immediately released his big move? A mad dog is indeed a mad dog, always thinking what ordinary people can't think. When Wang Lu was secretly surprised by his master's non-phase sword, Wang Wu herself put her attention on the sky and softly sighed. He immediately released his big move? Is it Tianyu? Wang Wu pointed her finger at the sky. Look at it yourself. Wang Lu looked at the sky and saw that it was still the sky with half yin and half yang. The dark clouds and the dazzling sunlight each symbolized one side, tearing each other in the sky, fighting to the death. There didn't seem to be anything special, and there was no change from before. Where's the light? I can't see the light. At this time he heard Bai Shixin look up at the sky and exclaim. Wang Lu curiously said, "Little Bai, could it be that you've evolved from Bai Shixin to cataract?" As soon as his voice fell, his master slapped him on the back of his head. "Idiot, you have the nerve to laugh at Little Bai, it's clear that you're ignorant. Try to use your non-phase absurd power to look at it again." Wang Lu tried to circulate his magical power, which he was not particularly proficient in, into his eyes, and then looked up again. What he saw in front of him made him greatly surprised. The sky was dark, and only the billowing dark clouds vaguely showed their outlines. The sunlight that filled the sky had disappeared without a trace. In other words, the battle between yin and yang that Tianyu had seen just now was an illusion that Tianyu had deliberately set up. He had covered the sky for hundreds of miles or even thousands of miles, just to hide the rolling black clouds in the sky? What is this? Wang Wu explained, Tianyu was originally a monster cultivator. In the past he was enlightened by the essence of the moonlight, and then every step of his cultivation was based on the moon. The brighter and brighter the moonlight, the stronger his strength. However, the moon waxes and wanes, so how could it always be full? So, Wang Wu stopped halfway through her sentence because there was no need to say more. The change in the sky had shown everything. As the Pope continued to release the holy light, the illusion that shrouded the sky finally collapsed. However, as the illusion disappeared, the earth was plunged into darkness. Just now it was clearly a sunny day, but now it was a deep night like it was daytime. While everyone was panicking from the rolling dark clouds, a silver light pierced through the darkness and descended to the earth. A bright moon peeked out from behind the dark clouds. The bright moonlight washed away all the filth of the mortal world, making people feel as if they were in a dreamy fairyland. In Taba City, Wang Lu felt that it was inconceivable. Especially when he felt the familiar aura of the moonlight, he was deeply confused. Damn. It's daytime, where did the moon come from? Moreover, it's the moon of 9 regions? This familiar aura of the moonlight is not released by the moon of the western continent. Wang Wu lightly replied from the side, of course he carries it with him. The reason why he could advance from the peak of deity stage to unity stage is because of this move, the unity of heaven and earth, the body carrying the moon. That's how he got the name Supreme Tianyu. In other words, the bright moon in the sky is Tianyu himself? Yes, because the moonlight only falls at night, so he has to cast the great day and night technique first. In order to avoid being noticed by the Pope and interrupted, he used the bewitching blade and illusion as a smokescreen. Although this mad dog is crazy, his handling of the details is worth learning. Watch carefully, this level of battle is rare. While speaking, Wang Wu's complexion gradually became dignified. At this time, the Pope's complexion in the sky above Taba City was particularly heavy. When the heavenly moon appeared, even if he was not familiar with the characteristics of Tianyu's method, he knew that he had fallen into the opponent's plot, which delayed the time, causing the situation to be somewhat passive. However, the more this was the case, the more he couldn't be impatient. Even though he was confident that he had the advantage in strength, whether it was in the east or west continent, the characteristics of the moon were soft and changeable, good at using softness to overcome hardness. If he was not careful, the advantage in strength would be easily taken advantage of. At the same time, the 9 regions cultivators who watched the fight were also curious. At this time, Tianyu had already cast the Great Day and Night technique and the bright moon in the sky, and his strength had climbed to the peak, allowing him to display his demon method and immortal method to his heart's content. However, the Pope also responded in an instant. He projected the sea of holy light into the world. Although it could not break the Great Day and Night technique, it made the holy city into a sea of light. The remains of the 13 deceased holy ones in the holy cathedral resonated with the holy light. A moment later, the 13 holy ones in the sky surrounded the Pope, and their imposing manner soared to the sky. One attack and one defense, both sides had their own unique moves, which was breathtaking. In contrast, Tianyu's swordsmanship was unconventional and had a series of tricks, while the Pope used his strength to break the skillful move. Wait a minute, didn't they say it's one-on-one? What's with these 13 thugs? In the distance, some of the 9 region spectators raised their doubts. They're called Beast? Our Wanxian League's Beast Control Sect cultivators also bring dogs when they fight. In this way, the Pope only released 13 human-shaped fierce dogs, which was in line with the rules. However, the Holy Light priests who were watching the fight with the 9 regions people from the side had gloomy faces. However, after a few words, they turned their attention back to the sky. Next, in the face of the power of the Pope, how would Tianyu use the Great Day and Night technique to contend against the Pope and his 13 holy ones? People were waiting to see. Suddenly, several sharp-eyed spectators exclaimed, "Look at the sky!" In the sky, the bright moon trembled slightly, like a boulder touching water, stirring up a circle of ripples. The next moment, the bright moon dived down. Chapter 357. Since ancient times, there had been too many things falling from the sky, from small fragments of meteorites to large burning meteors. There was no lack of blessings from the heavens on the earth, and many kinds of meteorite metals were essential materials for forging divine weapons. For many professions in the Western continent, the attack from the sky was not uncommon. Those high-order magicians could summon huge meteorites from the 9th heaven. After a long acceleration, a room-sized meteorite could destroy a city. Although the attack was simple and crude, it was really powerful. However, while the power was boundless, this overly simple and direct attack was often easy to be cracked. For high-order professions, there were too many ways to avoid the pure physical damage, which was twice the result with half the effort. Meteorites were mostly used to bully the weak. Then, at this moment, when people saw the full moon falling from the sky above their heads, like a demon king that could destroy the world, their hearts were stupefied. Under the great pressure, not to mention the ability to think normally, even fear, panic, and other emotions couldn't be aroused. Those in Taba City, those who were watching the battle from dozens of miles away, and those who were watching the battle from thousands of miles away, all of them were sincerely shocked by this miracle at this moment. Falling moon. It turned out to be falling moon. There was actually such a terrifying spell in the world. Even though the moon formed by Supreme Tianyu was far less than the diameter of a real full moon, if this terrifying giant fell to the ground, not to mention a mere holy city, perhaps the entire Western continent would tremble. The land within thousands of miles around the holy city would sink, lava would erupt, and all life would be cut off. If a Supreme of Unity stage used all of his energy to destroy, he could indeed destroy all the people on the path. No one thought that such an attack could be withstood, and it was even impossible to divert the force to the side. The power was so huge that it was hard to imagine that this was a spell that belonged to a mortal. Turning oneself into a moon and falling straight down, perhaps even the legendary moon god was just like this. Moreover, how could a mortal resist the attack of a god? While everyone was dumbfounded, the Pope still maintained his calm. With a calm face, he waved his scepter, and the 13 holy ones around him turned into 13 lightning bolts and flew in different directions, disappearing from everyone's sight in a flash. Spread out? If he didn't gather his strength and fight to the death, how could he disperse his strength? Is he giving up on this round? Among the spectators there was no lack of negative conjectures. They thought that the Pope did not want to fight head-on, lest both sides suffer. However, in the next moment, the 13 pillars of light that shot into the sky made these people realize how shallow they were. The 13 pillars of light appeared in different parts of the continent. The furthest from each other was nearly 1,000 miles away, but all of them pierced through the clouds. All of them came from the places of faith under the jurisdiction of the Church. Eternal Summer City, Rainbow Forest, Flaming Canyon. Each of them was the holy land of holy light religion that had written countless legends for thousands of years. The 13 holy lands were ignited by the 13 holy ones at the same time. The accumulated holy light for thousands of years violently erupted, as if to tear the entire sky. At this moment, as the leader of the Church and the number one representative of the sea of holy light in the mortal world, how could he possibly escape? Behind him was the foundation of the Church. If he escaped, how could holy light religion have the face to command hundreds of millions of believers? Proclaim the greatness of the holy light to the people? Therefore, the Pope could only face it head-on, only by using stronger power and more overbearing means to overwhelm the opponent. And as the strongest legend in the Western continent, Pope Billy was confident that he could do it. Even though the opponent's spell had set foot in the realm of God, at this moment, backed by the pious faith of hundreds of millions of people, the Pope was confident that he could even fight against a true God. Heretic, the sea of holy light will destroy you. The Pope loudly roared, raised the scepter in his hand, and issued a command that symbolized the highest authority of the sea of holy light. Under him, the holy city of the Church suddenly burst out with astonishing energy. In the church area, the holy light was as thick as a substance, wrapping everything in it. A moment later, the holy dome of the holy cathedral was smashed, and a vortex with infinite suction force was formed. The 13 pillars of light in the distance were instantly drawn and gathered in one place. What came out was a sea of light. Sea of holy light. The Pope is summoning the real sea of holy light. In the holy city, several high-order priests inconceivably looked at the light that converged in the sky. A moment later, tears flowed down their cheeks and their knees trembled. That light carried a majesty that was difficult to look straight at. Even the Pope was as small as a speck of dust compared to it. That was a majesty that did not belong to the human world, only God could have. The belief of holy light religion was not a personified God, so the only thing that could suppress the hundreds of millions of believers was the real sea of holy light. It was not a projection summoned by the believers but the real thing. This was also one of the few times in the history of holy light religion that the real sea of holy light descended. Over the holy city, the platinum light was boundless. From a height of thousands of meters, it spread upward for tens of thousands of miles, occupying a small half of the vast western continent. Moreover, it continued to expand like a real endless sea, swallowing everything in the continent. At the same time, all the forces in the western continent were shocked. Did holy light religion want to take this opportunity to sweep the continent with the absolute strength of the sea of holy light? However, before they could react, the falling moon of Tianyu finally broke through the clouds and came to the world, colliding head-on with the platinum sea of holy light. At first, it was silent. There was no earth-shattering collapse, no landslides or tsunamis. The sea of holy light gently embraced the falling moon, and the falling momentum of the full moon suddenly slowed down. Its speed from thousands of miles in the sky rapidly slowed down. This slowing momentum was silent but irreversible. Tianyu's world-shaking falling moon technique seemed unstoppable, but in the end, under the obstruction of the sea of holy light, it became slower and slower. Water is the power of tolerance, and the endless vast sea of holy light has the mind to tolerate everything. In the holy city there was a burst of cheers. The holy light religion believers shouted, "Long live the Pope," and celebrated the victory in advance. In their view, the omnipotent holy light has purified the sin, so victory was only a matter of time. However, soon, everyone heard a tearing buzz, like the precursor of an earthquake and tsunami. However, when they looked around, the mountains and rivers were as stable as ever, without any tremor. It's the space is trembling. The complexion of several high-order professions with keen perception changed as they perceived the instability of the space. They immediately realized that the head-on collision of the two powerful forces in the sky was a great burden to the entire space. And once the space collapsed, it would be a disaster for the heaven and earth. However, at this moment, who could intervene in the battle between the two of them? As the full moon struggled to break through layer by layer under the obstruction of the sea of holy light, the aftermath of the energy continued to pour down to the ground, sweeping everything on the ground. Some of the weak spectators hiding in the wilderness were instantly blown away by the sweeping energy. And the general high-order professions also felt oppressive and heavy. The aftermath was already like this, so no one could get close to the main battlefield of the battle. Fortunately, the space of the Western continent was, after all, more stable than people imagined. Although it continued to tremble and groan, it never really cracked. And as time went by, the situation of the battle began to tilt in favor of one side, the Pope's side. The full moon began to find it difficult to continue. Wrapped in the sea of holy light, its falling momentum became slower and slower. From breaking through the clouds to nearly 100 miles from the ground, it finally almost stopped, unable to move forward even half an inch. With its unparalleled tolerance, the sea of holy light resolved the momentum of the falling moon. Moreover, it seemed that it still had plenty to spare. However, this time Supreme Tianyu could no longer have any tricks up his sleeves. The gap in strength was already clear at a glance. The Pope's stage was slightly higher than him, not to mention that he still had the holy city of Taba and hundreds of millions of believers behind him. The holy city and the believers were no doubt a burden, but they were also a powerful help. A pope with the holy city behind him was not much different from a god. Moreover, Supreme Tianyu's bright moon in the sky could only reach a higher stage at the moment of falling, so how could it be compared with the Pope? Even though the falling full moon was only a counterfeit of Tianyu's incarnation, it still seemed very oppressive. However, being quietly held in the air by the sea of holy light, it seemed somewhat powerless. Good, the first round is really won. A senior archbishop heaved a long sigh of relief and withdrew his gaze from the sky. The church and the 9 regions people agreed on 3 rounds of competition, and the Pope stepped forward. Sure enough, they won a good start. However, in the second round it was difficult for them to have a full grasp. Although the prophet had a pair of godlike eyes, he was not good at fighting. Moreover, after the Pope summoned the Sea of Holy Light, the accumulation of Holy Light religion in the past 1,000 years was almost squandered, so it could no longer provide any powerful support to the prophet. However, if they could win one of the 3 rounds, the church would be in an invincible position. Thus, driving these 9 regions heretics out of the Western continent was barely an acceptable result. However, just as people began to calculate the next step, a sudden change disrupted everything. Taba City disappeared. There was no sign, no sound. Just a moment ago, Taba City was the most important pillar for the Pope to summon the Sea of Holy Light, simultaneously absorbing the energy from the 13 holy places. The next moment, it disappeared without a trace, as if it had never appeared. What disappeared was not the entire Taba City, but the ancient Taba City with a long history. The residents of the city, the new buildings in recent years, the Holy Light Religion Church and so on, were all left behind, falling on the soft sand. Some of the tall buildings soon collapsed. The residents of the city looked at the sudden change around them in disbelief, finding it hard to understand. How could Taba City disappear? Among the people present, only Wang Lu guessed that Golden King was retrieving his own treasure house. However, the timing was a bit delicate. It was difficult to say whether it was intentional by Golden King, or if Holy Light Religion was really out of luck. Because just a moment after Taba City disappeared, the Sea of Holy Light in the sky collapsed. Summoning this great existence was essentially going against the heaven's will, and it was also a great burden for a legendary level powerhouse. The Pope was backed by the holy city of Taba, and with the help of a long time of accumulation, he could barely do it. But once his backing disappeared. In mid-air, the old man wearing a golden red cloak and holding a scepter disappeared without a trace along with the Sea of Holy Light. Chapter 358. In the sky, the Sea of Holy Light and the Pope disappeared together, as if they had never appeared. The falling full moon also shattered with a loud bang, and countless fragments fell down like raindrops. At the core of the full moon, Supreme Tianyu, with a pale face, lightly wiped the trace of blood from the corner of his mouth, and then slowly flew backward without saying a word. Inside and outside the battlefield, the spectators were all stunned. The sudden change just now was so fast that people couldn't even judge what was going on. Did Tianyu win or did the Pope win? If the Pope won, why was Tianyu, this heretic devil, still alive? And if Tianyu won with his mad dog-like temperament, how could he be so silent? Even if he was seriously injured, he would still loudly boast about his victory. While everyone was puzzled, from the 9 regions side, a person slowly flew over. He had a kind countenance and a sage-like demeanor. He was the highest person in charge of the 9 regions cultivators in the western continent, Feng Yin. Please send out a person from your honorable religion. Feng Yin Taoist master's voice was soft and gentle, like a breeze caressing the face. However, when he opened his mouth, everyone within a radius of thousands of miles could clearly hear his voice, as if it was right next to their ears. It showed that his magical power was quite brilliant, but not as wild as Tian Yu's. It was just that, while Feng Yin was in mid-air, no one from the Holy Light religion side responded for a long time. It was not until a long time later that several bishops in the Holy Cathedral opened their mouths. The result of the previous fight is not yet decided, so it's not the turn for the next person to fight. Feng Yin smiled and didn't say anything, ignoring them. Because when those bishops raised their doubts, another person stood out from the Holy Cathedral. Like the Pope, he walked slowly, but with each step he crossed a distance of hundreds of meters. After 3 steps he arrived in front of Feng Yin. That person was wearing a golden red cloak, a crown on his head, and a scepter in his hand. It was the Pope's attire. With his appearance, the cheers of millions of people boiled up. It was just that, the cheers abruptly stopped after a moment because people found out that the person was not Pope Billy III, but the number 2 figure of Holy Light religion, Prophet Harrington. But why would the scepter, crown, and holy robe that symbolized the authority of the Pope appear on him? Prophet Harrington and Pope Billy have been close friends for many years. From the grassroots to the peak of Holy Light religion, Prophet Harrington's contribution cannot go unnoticed. If he wanted to rebel, how could he wait until today? Then, finally, in the midst of their shock, they realized that Pope Billy III had really fallen. Fortunately, he had his best friend, Harrington, so the position of the Pope would not be empty. After inheriting the Pope's scepter and crown, Harrington's power would not be much weaker than Billy's. Good plan. In the silence, Harrington opened his mouth coldly, his eyes full of killing intent. The prophet, who had always been modest and low-key, was now boiling with anger. You predicted that the ghosts under the holy city would cause trouble at this time, so you deliberately chose today to start the battle. You calculated that the ghosts would collude with you, so you let that demon Tian Yu release his killer move, using the entire continent as a hostage to force him to summon the Sea of Holy Light with the help of the holy city. This is a series of conspiracies. You claim to fight one-on-one, but in fact it's 2-on-1, really despicable and shameless. Upon hearing these words, everyone present suddenly understood. No wonder Tian Yu didn't say anything after winning. After all, he also knew that his victory was not an honorable one. Moreover, he even borrowed the power of the Lingjian school. However, these words also confirmed that Pope Billy III had really fallen. The first battle was really won by the people of 9 regions, although this victory was indeed somewhat despicable. Despicable and shameless? If fellow Taoist Tian Yu relied more or less on the power of scheming, then what about the power of faith of hundreds of millions of believers? Feng Yin didn't show any weakness. Since you're willing to bet, you must be willing to lose. Is your sect going to go back on your words? Prophet Harrington waved his scepter. No, I want you to know that because of your despicable and shameless actions, after the 2 battles, you will wear thorns and shackles, and kneel in front of the holy cathedral for thousands of years to repent for your sins. Feng Yin no longer talked nonsense. Let's wait and see. Harrington waved his scepter, and the surrounding space became dense and stagnant. Countless illusions hovered around the 2 of them. People vaguely saw that in the illusions, Feng Yin Taoist master's body was bathed in blood and was torn apart under the purification of the holy light. People saw that the 9 regions side was completely annihilated, and several leaders were bound in shackles and kneeling in front of the holy cathedral. People saw that the Sea of Holy Light once again descended on the western continent, and the supreme light purified all the heretics. Harrington loudly roared, "I have seen the future. That is the future of your destruction." Along with his roar, the surrounding illusions rapidly changed and finally stopped at the scene where Feng Yin was purified by the holy light. Thousands of virtual images gradually condensed, as if they wanted to turn the virtual into the real, the fake into the real. Great prophecy, this is the prophet's great prophecy? Many people in the cathedral exclaimed. Prophet Harrington had not made a serious move for many years. Now that he inherited the power of the Pope, the power of his great prophecy was several times stronger than before. Harrington's eyes seemed to be able to understand the cause and effect of this world, and with his skillful manipulation, he directly changed the fate. This was not only a legendary level method but also close to the level of God. At this time, even if they were not familiar with the power system of the Western continent, they could still see the brilliance of it. All the cultivators of 9 regions who participated in the battle were on tenterhooks. Even Supreme Tianyu might not be able to resist this move. Although Feng Yin Taoist Master was the leader of one of the 5 uniques, after all, he was just a peak deity stage cultivator. However, Feng Yin himself was not in a hurry. Facing the oppressive illusion, he just lightly waved his hand and said a few words. "You're wrong." The next moment, the thousands of illusions vanished. "You?" Harrington, who was in midair, looked at Feng Yin in disbelief, and then his expression gradually turned serious. Previously, when Pope Billy fought against Supreme Tianyu, Harrington had made several prophecies before the battle, trying to gain some advantage for the Pope. However, without exception, all of them were hidden behind a layer of fog. Obviously, it was deliberately disturbed by a powerful person. And now, it seemed that the person who could disturb his prophecy was the person in front of him. "You're the prophet of 9 regions?" Upon hearing this, Feng Yin sighed. "Prophet? I'm just an old thing who can't even distinguish the T-sword from the year sword. I can't even say that I can do the divination." The dialogue between the two of them was in their native language. Because in their realm, their words were the law, and their magical power was constantly changing, so the meaning was naturally understood. However, for many of the spectators, the dialogue between the two seemed obscure and difficult to understand. A young cultivator, who was an elder who came to watch the battle, was puzzled. What is Feng Yin Taoist Master talking about? Although he has always been low-key and modest in front of Western continent people, is it necessary to be so modest? Just kill him quickly and win the second round like Supreme Tianyu, the faster the better. As soon as his voice fell, his master's palm fell on his head. Don't talk nonsense. Do you think that Western continent people are so easy to kill? Do you think it's easy for Supreme Tianyu to kill the Pope? For the cultivators of the elder generation who came to watch the battle, these 2 battles were soul-stirring. Supreme Tianyu's bright moon in the sky and the Pope's sea of holy light were already god-level means. Even the aftermath of the battle was enough to make these nascent soul and soul formation cultivators tremble. The successor of the Pope, Harrington, seemed to be weaker than Billy, but his great divination technique was also infinitely powerful. It directly obliterated the opponent from the level of cause and effect. Although it was not as brilliant as the Sea of Holy Light, its power could not be underestimated. If it was anyone else present, even Supreme Tianyu might not be able to withstand it. Only Feng Yin Taoist Master, a cultivator who was famous in the Wanxian League for his stellar diffraction technique, could easily crack the opponent's cause and effect attack. No, it was not easy at all. That wave of his hand could probably extract more than half of the magical power of ordinary peak deity stage cultivators. No matter how powerful Feng Yin was, it was impossible for him to do it easily. "You're very powerful," Harrington coldly said, "but Holy Light religion has eliminated too many powerful opponents in the past thousands of years." Feng Yin said with a smile, "Powerful? You flatter me. I'm just a third-rate fortune teller. I can barely calculate 1 or 2 steps in the future. Anything further than that, I'm powerless." Regarding Feng Yin's indifferent attitude, Harrington didn't think that he was being humble and low-key, but rather a deep pride. Therefore he decided not to talk nonsense with him anymore. He raised his scepter and once again tried to use the supreme authority of the Holy Light to command the cause and effect. However, at this time he heard Feng Yin sigh. It's about time for this meaningless battle to end. While speaking, he raised his hand. A row of silver flying swords flew out from his wide sleeve and pierced the sky. At this time, the day and night left by Supreme Tianyu had not yet disappeared. Although the dark clouds above their head gradually dispersed, they still covered half of the sky. The row of flying swords pierced the clouds, and the sky once again became as if it was dyed with thick ink. The next moment, the flying swords burst into thousands of fragments, which dotted the thick darkness like a dazzling galaxy. "This is the move of my humble sect's star sword technique, please advise me." While speaking, Feng Yin pointed the sword in his right hand downwards. Then, the galaxy fell to the ground and turned into a huge silver sword that pierced straight down. Although it was with the help of the spell left by Supreme Tianyu, the power of this sword was not inferior to the bright moon in the sky. Harrington's face was extremely solemn. The target of the great prophecy spell was also locked on this huge sword. Then he spoke in a deep voice which resounded in all directions. "In front of the holy light, the blasphemous weapon will stagnate." While speaking, the galaxy sword seemed to be slightly stagnant for a moment. "My eyes can penetrate the long river of time and witness the rise and fall of all things." Around the long sword, countless illusions were generated and rotated like fragments. Finally, Harrington forcefully stopped the scepter in the air. and I have foreseen its collapse. Boom. Thousands of illusions suddenly stopped rotating and stuck to the surface of the long sword. As the prophecy spell reached the last step, the power of cause and effect broke out. The long sword groaned and finally collapsed. At the same time, Harrington's face froze before he could put on a smile. A sharp long sword was pressed against his neck. In front of him, Feng Yin tilted his head and said in a low voice, "This is the Star Sword techniques. Diversion." Chapter 359. Generally speaking, Feng Yin Taoist master was a man of simple character and pure moral integrity. When he was a member of the Standing Committee of the Wanxian League, he had always been low-key and modest. Therefore, even the 9 regions cultivators who were most looking forward to his victory did not expect that he would use this kind of tasteless trick. For a time, the battlefield was completely silent. Feng Yin Taoist master turned his head sideways, seemingly a bit embarrassed. This tasteless way to win was not his intention. It was just that when Harrington went all out to fight against the Galaxy Sword, his flaws were so big that he, as a practical cultivator, could not hold back. It could be seen that Harrington's actual combat experience was very shallow. He had been hiding behind Billy all his life as an advisor, giving advice and foreseeing the future. Although he had a more detached posture than Billy, it also caused him to seriously lack actual combat experience, especially in the face of a powerhouse of the same level. He inherited the power of the Pope, but he could not inherit the Pope's actual combat experience. In the face of an opponent like Feng Yin, he would lose everything in just one move. In 9 regions, a cultivator who relied on his experience to bully a newcomer was not honorable. Therefore, although Feng Yin didn't show any mercy in his victory, thinking that there was a group of onlookers not far away, he couldn't bear to lose face. Good move. Although Harrington had a sharp sword on his body, he was not in a hurry. But do you think you've won? Then cut it down. Feng Yin chuckled. I have also heard of the Holy Light Religion's immortal body. When the Holy Light Religion's believers reached the level of Holy Light Religion, they basically had the ability to come back from the dead. Although this ability had a strong limitation, it was still a heaven-defying ability. Although Feng Yin had gained a temporary advantage, not to mention that when he launched the Galaxy Sword, he had consumed a lot of magical power, which was not enough for him to use his full strength. Although his sword momentum was fast, it might not be able to break Harrington's Pope's robe. Moreover, even if it was broken, the opponent could still come back from the dead. At most, he lost one move, which was not important. Feng Yin said, "It's not easy to kill you, but conversely, it's not easy for you to win against me." Harrington did not say a word. He waved his scepter with all his strength and once again touched the line of cause and effect, regardless of Feng Yin's sword on his neck. It was clear that he would rather sacrifice his life to continue fighting. Although his combat experience was lacking, his will to fight did not lose to anyone. After his friend of many years, Billy, fell, he must support the sky for Holy Light Religion at all costs. However, at this time, Feng Yin withdrew his sword. Enough, there's no need to continue this fight. As he spoke, he retreated backwards. His figure drifted erratically as he nimbly moved around the myriad of karmic threads controlled by Harrington. It was as if he was dancing on the tip of a needle, nimble and swift. In the blink of an eye, he had returned to the camp of the 9 regions cultivators. Harrington of Harrington's words. Harrington, Feng Yin said, Feng, Holy Light, Feng, Sect, Lu, Feng, Feng Yin smiled and said, "Do you remember the conditions of our initial fight? If we win all 3 battles, please promise us 2 conditions. First, open the Golden King's treasure house and let us find what we want." Harrington coldly said, "Yes, but the future that I foresee is that you will be defeated in 2 battles and repent for thousands of years under the purification of the Holy Light." Feng Yin's smile became brighter. "Since you're so good at foreseeing the future, have you ever foreseen that we have already got what we want?" While speaking, he suddenly stretched out his right hand and opened his palm. A simple and unadorned block like a seal appeared in the palm of his hand. Seeing that block, Harrington slightly frowned because he could not see through it. He just faintly felt that this block seemed to be inextricably linked to the Golden King's treasure house. This is the purpose of our 9 regions cultivators coming to the Western continent. Harrington's brows wrinkled even tighter. He secretly launched his great prophecy technique. His eyes penetrated through the river of time and cause and effect. Following the block in Feng Yin's hand, he soon saw a group of young 9 regions cultivators. Holding the block, they quietly crossed the battlefield under the cover of an elder-level cultivator. Taking advantage of the fierce battle in the sky, they sneaked into the camp of 9 regions people from the ruins of Taba City and sent the block to Feng Yin's hand with a spell. Looking back, Harrington was shocked to see that those young 9 regions cultivators actually came out from the Golden King's treasure house. And the one who led them was impressively the culprit who stirred up trouble in Bretonia, the legendary gigolo of the Night King. He was also the primary target of Faceless One, Paul, Ferdinand, and the others. At this moment, his appearance meant that the operation of Faceless One and the others had failed, and those who participated in the hunt might have fallen. What was even more fatal was that, while those 9 regions cultivators got rid of Faceless One and the others, they also got the key of 9 regions people from the treasure house. This meant that, while putting away the key of the group of immortal tombs, Feng Yin lightly said, "The meaning of our victory no longer exists. Even if we win all 3 battles, you can't get the second key of the group of immortal tombs. Not to mention, I'm afraid the Golden King's treasure house is not under your control, so what's the point of gambling?" Harrington was silent, but his grip on the scepter tightened. Did the 9 regions people want to just leave like that? After causing the fall of 3 holy ones of Holy Light religion, including the Pope himself, and destroying the King's treasure house, the biggest strategic foundation of Holy Light religion in the past 100 years, they just want to pat their butts and leave? Calm down, it's not good for anyone to continue fighting. Feng Yin advised, your noble religion's vitality has been damaged, so the most urgent thing is to recuperate and lick the wound. If you insist on forcing the war, perhaps we will suffer losses, but your noble religion's loss will be incalculable, and the 10,000 years old religion will fall apart and cease to exist. In your dreams. Feng Yin said, no, this is the calculated future. With that, he gently waved his hand, and a flying sword flew out like lightning. Harrington ignored this. He had the holy robe left by the Pope, so his defensive ability was quite strong. This kind of understated attack was simply not enough. A muffled sound of metal penetrating flesh was heard. Harrington felt a chill on his chest. When he looked down, he saw that Feng Yin's flying sword had penetrated his chest, leaving only the hilt and a small part of the sword stuck in his chest. The sword was engraved with a simple and unadorned 9 regions character, which seemed to be a prop used by the other party to cast the Great Change technique. However, this prop-like sword could directly penetrate the defense of the holy robe, trampling all the defensive principles and power under its feet, causing a fatal result. It was as if the heaven was destined to make it drink blood like a karmic attack. In amazement, Harrington's body has involuntarily turned into holy light. This was the spontaneous activation of the resurrection ability of a holy one. A moment later, the light gathered again, and his body also returned to its original state. The long sword in his chest disappeared, the wound healed, and even the broken holy robe was repaired. However, the cold pain in his chest still remained, reminding him of what had just happened. The coldness in the pain was like a freeze that made him unable to move. Okay, let's go. Feng Yin said and beckoned the 9 regions cultivators who were watching the battle to leave. Although the cultivators were somewhat inexplicable and couldn't see what had happened, Feng Yin's Star River overflowing sword and karmic piercing flying sword had successfully shocked the audience, making them involuntarily obey his orders. When the 9 regions people left, the Holy Light religion was in an uproar. Several archbishops couldn't help but want to fly out to stop them, but they found that there seemed to be an invisible barrier in front of them. No matter what, they couldn't go forward. That's enough, go back. Harrington's weak voice came from the sky, and then he slowly landed. His face was full of vicissitudes, and his eyebrows seemed to have aged a lot. Why? An archbishop could not restrain himself and asked, let them go just like that? Where would the face of our holy light religion be? How could we? Harrington's voice became stern. In the next 50 years or even 100 years, we must recuperate and must not lightly start a war. Do you think we only have one opponent, the 9 regions cultivators? Countless people in the continent are looking forward to the destruction of holy light religion. Otherwise, how could these 9 regions cultivators come here? At this time, acting on impulse is irresponsible to the thousands of years of foundation of holy light religion and the sea of holy light. The stern reprimand barely suppressed people's doubts. However, perhaps only Harrington himself knew that the reason why he didn't dare to go forward to kill them was because the other party's last sword had completely shattered his fighting spirit. The flying sword didn't look impressive, and the flying sword itself didn't have much power. However, it pierced through time and space, arriving in front of him through the karmic threads. This method didn't require any complicated techniques, and it wasn't as brilliant and all-encompassing as the great prophecy technique. However, it was extremely sharp and one sword could break through all techniques. Even if he understood it, he was powerless to stop it. Perhaps if Billy III was here, he could suppress the opponent with fair and square strength. However, for Harrington, who was accustomed to relying on prophecy technique, Feng Yin was simply the perfect opponent to restrain him. Feng Yin could kill him once so he could kill him a second time. If they continued to fight, it was really unnecessary. It would simply be throwing away one's life in vain. Looking at the back of the 9 regions cultivators that were constantly going away, Harrington's heart was like dead ashes, and his holy light was dim. On the other side, the 9 regions people who returned to the capital were talking about it. The mystery of Feng Yin's last sword strike was only known to the 2 parties involved. In other people's view, the beginning and the end of the fight were somewhat inexplicable. However, one thing was clear. Their purpose of crossing the endless sea to the west had been achieved. The key to open the group of immortal tombs had been taken by Feng Yin Taoist master. And the person who really achieved this goal was Wang Lu, but at this time he was in a delicate predicament. Wang Lu, I think it's time for us to say goodbye. Aya faintly smiled. In her green eyes, there was a complex mixture of heroic spirit and tenderness. Chapter 360. The 9 regions cultivators who returned from the Holy City in triumph never stopped talking about it along the way. Although the 2 battles at the foot of the Holy City did not last long, they were thrilling and soul-stirring. Supreme Tianyu's Unity Stage super powerful spell, the Pope's power to summon the Sea of Holy Light, the new Pope's great prophecy technique to reverse the cause and effect, as well as Feng Yin Taoist Master's superior stellar diffraction technique. This was a wonderful battle that had not been seen in 9 regions for many years, which left people with endless aftertaste. The changes outside of the battle were also unexpected. How did Feng Yin Taoist Master get the key to the group of immortal tombs? Why did the King's Treasure House of Holy Light religion suddenly disappear? Why did Feng Yin Taoist Master not pursue the victory? There were many mysteries in the hearts of the spectators, but unfortunately, the people who knew the inside story did not reveal even a little bit of it. Feng Yin has always been low-key, but even that mad dog Tianyu was rarely silent. No one knew if it was because he was seriously injured or because of other reasons. In addition to Feng Yin and Tianyu, the most eye-catching person in the team was the lead disciple of Lingjian School, Wang Lu. Because some people in the team with discerning eyes saw that when the battle was in full swing, they were escorted by the 5th elder of Lingjian School from the direction of Taoba City. How did they enter the interior of Taoba City? Since the mad dog Tianyu caused an all-out war between the 2 forces, Holy Light religion blocked Taoba City, making it very difficult for outsiders to enter, especially the cultivators of 9 regions. Moreover, according to a few people, the key in the hands of Feng Yin Taoist Master was provided by Wang Lu and the others. In other words, Wang Lu got the key one step earlier than anyone else present, which was even more puzzling. However, as the person involved, Wang Lu had no time to enjoy the feeling of being in the limelight. In front of him, Aya had already said her farewell words, and it seemed that their parting was just around the corner. All good things must come to an end. This is a sentence that I learned after crossing the 9 regions. I think this is probably the time. What you have to do in the Western continent is over, so you should soon return to 9 regions, and I will not be with you. Wang Lu opened his mouth to persuade her, but Aya was one step ahead of him. Thank you for everything you've done for me, but I can't go on with you. My home is here on this land. I can't leave my country and people behind. Although Wang Lu had expected this day as early as a few months ago, even before he set off from Spirit Sword Mountain, listening to Aya's words at this time, he still couldn't help but have a complicated mood. You can't abandon your country and people, but can you abandon your kitchen and your repeat customers? Aya bowed her head and smiled. I'm right here. You are welcome to come to Bretonia at any time. As long as it's you, no matter how many times, I'm willing to cook for you, although I know very well that my cooking is not good. Seeing that Aya had made up her mind to leave, Wang Lu had no choice but to reveal his trump card. Do you remember the bet you made with me in the treasury? In the fight against the barbarian race god of war, I said that if I could single-handedly delay the time, you would. Aya, of course, remembered that if Wang Lu could do it, she would agree to his request. At that time, although the bet was not formal, she still treated it seriously and never thought of reneging on the debt. It was just that Wang Lu didn't put forward any conditions at that time, so the matter was put down. When Wang Lu brought it up this time, it actually put her in a difficult position. Rest assured, I won't deliberately embarrass you. Wang Lu said and then turned to look for his master. Master, I have something to do here. You take Lioli and Little White back first. Aya and I will stay in the western continent for a while. Wang Wu was a bit surprised. She looked at the two of them and said, Not bad, are you going on a honeymoon? Just as Wang Lu was about to clarify the misunderstanding, his master took out a medicine bag from her mustard seed bag and earnestly handed it to Wang Lu. Disciple, Aya is a hard person. When you two are together, you have to take care of her and make her happy. This medicine is carefully mixed by me. No, I got it by chance. I don't have any use for it, so I give it to you. Remember to take the powder orally and apply the ointment externally. Wang Lu was inexplicably surprised. Master, why did you come to the western continent this time? Could it be that you fancy some of the black and white uncles here with big tools and a large number of people? Moreover, even this can't satisfy you. Why did you bring medicine to liven things up? His master put on a "how can you wrongly accuse me" expression. You're too sad. We've been together for 10 years, yet you still don't understand your master. Everything master does is for your own good. You see, this medicine bag has your name written on it. Wang Lu turned it over and saw that it was indeed so, which made him even angrier. Just you wait, it's not like I don't know your name. While the two of them were quarreling, Aya pushed him away. No need, I want to be alone. Before she could finish her words, Wang Lu took the initiative to put his arm around her shoulder. Haha, why are we being so polite? I'm your face. Before she could finish, she realized that things were going to be bad. Sure enough, she heard her master's sinister smile behind her. Face what? Don't tell me it's the face? Wang Lu said, there are so many words that start with face. Bread, flour, face the wall, how could you think of the face first? Wang Lu righteously explained, I'm her interviewer, please show some respect. Interview what? Wang Lu turned serious. Not only to his master but also to Aya, he said, it's about whether Aya is qualified to be the king of Bretonia or not. After bidding farewell to his master and the others, Wang Lu and Aya traveled alone on the road to Bretonia. Although there were too many things to report to the sect elders, when Wang Lu applied, his master and the sect leader very generously granted him a leave of absence. They also told him to pay attention to safety and be careful, and then kicked him away, completely letting him go. However, Wang Lu also knew that his trip to the western continent had indeed come to an end. The next thing to do was to clean up the mess, which was to solve Aya's problem. Solving Aya's problem was not only for himself, but also for the sect. Before leaving, his master and the sect leader respectively looked for him to talk. Feng Yin Taoist master fully embodied the art of leadership. He said, Wang Lu, you are the lead disciple of Lingjian school. I've always been at ease with what you do. However, this time we have to respect her personal wishes, understand? Wang Lu made a gesture of understanding. Adultery but not rape, I understand. After a while, his master came over and righteously said, Aya has been an inseparable member of Lingjian school since ancient times. Speak like a human being. Don't come back alone, understand? Wang Lu said, I know what you mean, it's best if the three of us come back together, right? His master smiled. Women, once they are pregnant, they will not be so stupid and stubborn. Unfortunately, she's a spirit of the brave departed, how could she be pregnant? His master's smile became thicker. Otherwise, what do you think my medicine is for? You're still young, yet you've already succeeded in cultivating non-phase method, can you really be dispirited? His master patted Wang Lu's shoulder. Young man, do a good job, I look forward to your good news. Good news? How could it be that easy? Aya's problem was not difficult, but it was not simple either. The two of them walked for a long time in silence. Wang Lu thought for a moment and then decided to ask, what exactly happened? Do you remember in the king's treasure house before we climbed the beautiful unique pool peak, we experienced a test? Wang Lu of course remembered. In the legend he was the only one who passed the test in the past tens of thousands of years. In the illusion, someone would propose an irresistible transaction or request. At that time he faced Faceless One and Aya. Who would she face? What, did you meet your old lover? Aya froze for a moment and then couldn't help but laugh. Old lover? The person I saw was you. Wang Lu was surprised. How could it be me? In the illusion the situation was both real and fake. Although it was an illusion, the transaction proposed by the other party was indeed feasible. Otherwise, everyone knew that it was fake, so naturally, everyone could refuse the transaction and calmly pass the test. However, at that time Wang Lu was clearly in an independent space, so how could there be a doppelganger next to Aya? Of course it's a fake person. Aya said, but what he said at that time, I don't think it's a lie. And what did he say? He said that he can help me achieve the revival of Bretonia, can help me solve the problem that I once troubled, and achieve the prosperity of the Night Path. Wang Lu nodded. Almost every sentence went straight to the G-spot. No matter how you look at it, it's me. What about his conditions? He wants me to give up the throne and return to 9 regions with him. Wang Lu was suddenly surprised and then fell into silence. Aya said, at first I thought he was just an illusion, but soon I realized that although he is not your real body, he is no different from you. What he said is indeed what you think in your heart. Are you so sure? Aya lightly said, no one should be able to imitate your characteristics. If someone can imitate it, it must be you. And then? Then I asked him why he made such a request, but he didn't answer me. He only asked me if I agreed or not. It was really hard for me to make a decision. Until the illusion was finally broken, I couldn't give him an answer. Now that I think about it, it's really indecisiveness that shames the knight's spirit. Wang Lu asked, so now you have an answer? Actually, I'm really curious. With such a good condition, why are you hesitating? Just quickly agree. Aya said, the condition is indeed very good, but if you want me to leave Bretonia, my duty, my mission, and go back to 9 regions with you to live a carefree life, I can't do it. You don't believe that I can fulfill my promise? If it was a few months ago, I might hesitate. But now, I have no doubt that you can do anything. In fact, you have done it. Upon hearing this, Wang Lu was startled. Then, he carefully looked at Aya and was surprised to find that her spirit of the brave departed seemed to have changed a lot, which meant, yes, I have completed the oath to find the way to win the war. The recovery of Bretonia has basically been established before I left Dragon City. Aya clenched her fists as if she was feeling the power in her body. Now, although I still can't be called a living person, I don't have to worry about my spirit failing and vanishing. Congratulations. Everything is thanks to you. Before I came here, I couldn't believe that I could really do this. Aya said, the light in her eyes became more and more firm. But because of this, I can no longer safely continue to rely on your strength and sit back and enjoy the fruits of others' labor. Right now, I have no reason to slack off. Next, I must shoulder my own mission and fulfill my duties as a king. Upon hearing this, Wang Lu was stunned for a long time. He sincerely admired Aya's invincible logic. Then he subconsciously put his hand into his mustard seed bag and touched the elixir that his master gave him before he left. Sometimes it was more convenient to use medicine. You're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.